Barry wasn't the kind to just wait and see. After realizing William had targeted him and figuring out William's plan after the bidding meeting, Barry decided to reach out to Maverick for help. If he were William, after hitting dead ends with both Derek and himself, he'd likely shift focus and go after someone close to Barry instead. Barry thought carefully, and the most likely person was Levi. Levi had been his trusted second-in-command for years, well aware of his schedule and decision-making process. So after Maverick warned him that William was making moves, Barry used a task at the branch office to send Levi away, keeping him from getting involved in the bidding, while also asking Maverick to watch over him discreetly. But what Barry hadn't expected was that, despite all his precautions, something still happened to Levi. Maverick explained what had happened over the phone. Levi was a man with a packed schedule, and as soon as he arrived at the branch office, he began making significant changes. His days were a routine of moving between the company and the hotel, surrounded only by business partners or colleagues. Almost no outsiders ever came into view. Maverick had booked the room next to Levi's, but didn't meet him in person. The first sign of something off happened a day ago, when Levi met a woman at the hotel. They seemed to know each other, and Levi even shared a meal with her there. Maverick was far away and didn't hear what they said, but he saw that the woman was clearly distressed. She cried deeply in front of Levi and briefly tried to hold him back from leaving. Levi appeared visibly frustrated but didn't engage further, quickly disengaging and walking away without delay. To be safe, Maverick sent someone to follow her and conducted an investigation, but she was highly alert and managed to lose their tracker soon after. At the same time, the person doing the investigation passed the information to Maverick, revealing that the woman was Levi's ex-girlfriend. Maverick thought something was off the moment he saw the message. From his perspective, Levi had been showing signs of closeness with Samuel, making this sudden appearance of a former girlfriend feel like an unknown gap in his memory. He tried reaching out to Levi right away but couldn't get through. Without hesitation, he headed straight for the branch office. Staff there said Levi hadn't come in today and had only sent a group message saying he had something important to attend to and had handed over his tasks to others. Levi had come here specifically to settle the ongoing issues at the branch, so it didn't make sense for him to just walk away without resolving them. Maverick went over his movements from the past 2 days, checked with hotels for any records, and asked a friend at the local traffic bureau to look into vehicle data. Soon he pinpointed the last known direction where Levi's car had been seen. The car ended up on the highway, but the person driving wasn't him, and then Levi simply vanished. Barry, what do we do now? Should we call the police? Maverick hesitated to act rashly. Given Levi's build, it wouldn't have been easy for someone to take him away quietly. The fact that it was done so smoothly made it hard to believe they weren't a professional group. If it was a professional team, they must have had a clear purpose. In the cafe, Derek sat upright and focused, while Barry was on the phone with Maverick and simultaneously communicating with Snowball. Snowball used the system to search and quickly found some leads. Found it. His ex-girlfriend wasn't just a corporate spy. She was also a specially trained agent cultivated by the Gu family. Levi has been taken to an abandoned warehouse in the urban village. Snowball sent the information and location details straight to Derek. Is Levi okay? The system shows abnormal vital signs but no immediate danger to life. Likely he was knocked out. Snowball couldn't see specific details about the person. The system only provided general data. Good news that there's no life-threatening risk. Derek confirmed Levi's location and started thinking about who he could rely on for help. Barry was still talking with Maverick when calls kept coming in. After glancing at the screen, he saw it was the bidding coordinator. Derek noticed too and said, "Brother, let me talk to Maverick. I'll handle this." The coordinator wasn't someone who acted without thinking. If there weren't serious issues, he wouldn't have called so urgently while knowing Barry was on the phone. Barry handed the phone to Derek and used Derek's phone to call back the contact. Derek took the phone and whispered, "Maverick, it's me, Derek. Do you remember my cousin Robert?" Maverick said, "Yes, I recall. He works at the Public Security Bureau, right?" Maverick's response eased Derek's mind. While fan-made stories often portrayed the Jiang and Liu families as having a single bloodline, in reality, Both clans had many branches spread across various professions. Derek's cousin Robert was a detective specializing in criminal investigations and had been transferred to the same district where Maverick now worked 2 years ago. Derek's lead wasn't reliable, so he couldn't simply hand it over to Maverick without putting him at risk. "I'll have my brother reach out to you. He has experience with situations like this. Just keep your phone on." Derek was about to call Robert when he finished speaking. Snowball stopped him. "Switch your phone and stay away from Barry." Derek looked confused, and Snowball said, "Can you guess why there are no collateral branches in the story?" "Of course, because they're essential support for the family's growth. If the world's awareness can block even his grandfather, blocking your cousin is nothing to it." The elder of the Liu family was like a living emblem of prestige. His network came from deep-rooted loyalty. With him around, troublemakers like William couldn't last for 3 chapters. Likewise, since someone in the Jiang family holds political power, if William were truly involved in criminal activities like some fan works suggest, it would be handing them a major achievement on a silver platter. Derek broke free from the narrative constraints, but Barry was still trapped within them. Snowball's warning wasn't without reason. Derek waited for Barry to finish the call, already thinking of a way to excuse himself. His mind was still caught on what he'd been thinking before picking up the phone, and he asked with concern, "What's going on?" Barry's sharp gaze flickered with hesitation. Before he could respond, Derek's phone buzzed. Another message had arrived from the supervisor. The photo showed Levi unconscious, the background messy and poorly lit. Clearly something was wrong. The image had been sent just minutes before the supervisor handed in their electronic devices, leaving no time to think. Dazed and overwhelmed, all Derek could do was call Barry to report it. His bid couldn't fail, but Levi was equally important to the company. Now Derek didn't need to ask. He already knew what had happened. The other side was extremely bold, clearly feeling completely confident. Both issues arrived at the same time, each equally critical. Barry's expression turned serious. He switched his phone back, stared at the photo on screen, and spoke coldly. "This is truly desperate behavior," Derek said. "I've got connections. I can reach someone to help find Levi. Don't worry, he'll be fine." Barry looked up. "I believe you." Barry heard Derek and the system's voice, but Robert, someone Derek mentioned, felt unfamiliar to him. He had no idea about Jiang family's distant branch, not even what Derek referred to as his grandfather. In his memory, his grandfather had passed away long ago. Could the world have changed so much that even the dead can return? Or was it just him who'd forgotten? Barry felt confused but knew this wasn't the time to dwell on it. Someone was waiting for him at the meeting. Time was tight. Without further explanation, they quickly agreed on the stakes and split up. Barry headed to meet the supervisor, while Derek reached out to Robert. Just as Snowball had predicted, the world's consciousness barrier caused Derek's first 2 calls to go unanswered, until the third one finally connected. Hearing Robert's voice on the other end, Derek let out a breath of relief. He called out, "Older brother," without going through small talk, then clearly laid out the current situation. Upon hearing about the case, Robert immediately took it seriously. He jotted down the clues and phone number Derek provided, gave a quick instruction, then hung up to start organizing help. With Maverick and Robert now involved, people from outside this world, the situation kept escalating. What began as a clash between individuals was now turning into an all-out confrontation between worlds. Derek put his phone away, took a sip of coffee, and glanced at the heavy skies beyond the cafe window. Above, dark clouds loomed like a storm front, casting the sky into dimness. The sun had vanished entirely behind the thick layers of cloud, and by mid-morning, it already felt as though night was falling. Soft music played in the cafe, making the quiet space even more peaceful due to the few people around. But this calm did nothing to ease Derek's tension. His mind was racing as he carefully considered the events of today. Detaining someone's freedom had crossed into illegal territory. If William gets caught doing this, even if he wins the bid, it'll all be cancelled, right? Derek frowned. No matter how bold William is, he should at least think about the consequences. Snowball said, "That's true, but how can we prove he's involved? You don't have any solid evidence." Can't the person who took Levi and those photos be used as proof? Snowball paused for a moment before saying, the one who took Levi was his ex-girlfriend. She could easily claim it was just a personal dispute, something done in the heat of emotion. As for the photos, they don't contain any meaningful details. What exactly would they prove? Derek was stunned. After all this, how can you still call it a simple emotional dispute? Snowball replied matter-of-factly. Isn't that just how people usually handle things? As long as there's been, or ever was, a romantic connection, people are always quick to make excuses and downplay serious issues. Derek tried to argue that people shouldn't be so blind as to confuse emotional disputes with deliberate harm, but before he could speak, real-life examples flooded his mind and left him speechless. There were far too many victims who had been brushed aside in the name of emotional conflicts. If the other party firmly claims it's just an emotional dispute and didn't cause real harm to Levi, even if they're called out, William still has plenty of ways to distance himself from blame. The absurdity of the situation collided with reality, making Derek let out a bitter laugh. After a brief silence, he decided not to push further for a resolution. Boom! A sudden thunderclap echoed outside, followed by a streak of silver lightning tearing across the sky. Many people jumped at the unexpected noise and began to grumble. Derek looked out the window, and another burst of lightning flashed across the sky. The wind howled outside, bending the grass and trees in the greenery. He wondered how Barry was doing over there. The dark, heavy sky unsettled Derek's mood. He stayed in the cafe, keeping in touch with Maverick and checking on their rescue progress. Time slipped by, maybe just a few minutes, or perhaps even tens of minutes. As torrential rain poured down alongside the fierce wind, it splattered noisily onto the ground, quickly forming a misty haze. The air carried the scent of dust soaked by rain, faintly mixed with a trace of something sharp and metallic. The ice in Derek's coffee had long melted. The cafe's fans whirred loudly, while beads of sweat formed on his forehead. His phone grew warm from being held too tightly. He was waiting for news, but both sides seemed to have agreed in silence. No updates at all. Just as Derek began to feel restless, a hand rested gently on his shoulder. Derek spun around quickly, spotting Barry standing beside him. The cuff of Barry's suit jacket had a damp stain, its color slightly different from the rest. Derek stood up and asked, "Is it over?" Barry adjusted his cuff slightly and gave a slight nod. His thick brows were lightly drawn together, and his blue eyes glowed with an unusual intensity in the dim light. Carrying a cold, icy edge, Derek felt a sinking sense of worry. Did something go wrong with the bid? Barry didn't state it outright. It's uncertain. Lingfeng's quote is lower than ours, and they're offering more concessions. Derek was surprised. Is William really willing to take a loss? Barry gave a faint smile, his gaze turning colder. Would he really take a loss? Whatever he gives up in the quote, he'll make up for somewhere else. There are many ways to manipulate things in a project, but what really bothered Barry was the way Lingfeng's bid data closely mirrored their own, either increasing where there's did or decreasing in parallel. The team lead had already taken everyone back to double-check everything. Barry came to pick up Derek, and they stepped out of the cafe as the rain seemed to ease a little. Derek's phone rang, and when he saw Maverick's name, his heart skipped a beat. He answered quickly. Maverick delivered mixed news. We found Levi, but something's off. He won't wake up no matter what we try. Barry and Derek drove through the rain to the branch city, arriving late that afternoon. The weather here wasn't perfectly clear, but compared to the downpour and thunderstorm just a short distance away, even this cloudy sky felt pleasant. Levi had been moved from emergency to a regular ward. His condition was unusual. There were no visible injuries, and his vital signs were stable, but he remained unconscious. The hospital recommended keeping him under observation. When Derek arrived, the only other people in the hospital besides Maverick were Samuel. Seeing Samuel surprised both Derek and Barry. Why are you here? Derek and Barry had rushed over as soon as they got the news, so Samuel couldn't have arrived ahead of them. Samuel said, I was just nearby. He paused for a moment, then added, just visiting the area. After leaving Huan Yu, Samuel made an effort to stay away from Levi, no longer organizing weekend gatherings or seeking chances to spend time together like he used to. He started spending more time alone, but over time, he realized it wasn't working as well as he'd hoped. Truly caring about someone doesn't mean they disappear from your mind just because you don't see them. Longing can grow in countless ways, pulling at your heart and keeping you awake at night. He knew Levi was away on business, and this visit was actually due to something important he needed to discuss with him, but hadn't expected to run into a situation like this. At the moment, it wasn't easy for him to admit he came here because of Levi, so saying he was just traveling served as a perfect excuse. Derek and the other man noticed but didn't press further. After a few polite remarks, they let the matter drop. Maverick explained Levi's condition, and all they could do now was wait. Wait for Levi to come around. Have you eaten yet after rushing over? I've already ordered food. Would you like to grab a bite first? Maverick had been busy all day. The intense focus earlier hadn't made him notice, but now that he'd relaxed, he realized how starved he was. So hungry his stomach felt like it was pressing against his chest. Samuel had already eaten. You two go ahead, he said. I'll stay here just fine. Derek and Barry didn't hesitate, so the three of them went to eat nearby. Preoccupied with their concerns, they finished quickly, spoke little during dinner, then returned to the hospital right after. Levi was in a private room. As they reached the door, they heard voices coming from inside. Momentarily excited, thinking Levi must have woken up, Maverick went first and opened the door. The person turned around. It wasn't Levi, but Robert, whom Maverick had just met earlier that morning. Robert was in casual clothes, with a short haircut, his appearance and demeanor sharp and alert. He was seated across from Samuel, the one who had been speaking just moments before. Mr. Robert, you're off duty. Maverick felt a small drop of disappointment, then glanced at Levi, who was still in the same state as before, showing no sign of waking up. Derek and Barry entered behind him. Derek was the first to speak, saying, "Brother." Barry studied Robert's expression, around 30 years old, his face bearing a serious look from years of frontline work. When Derek greeted him, a faint smile appeared on Robert's usually stern face as he gave a slight nod. Barry recognized their connection and followed suit, calling out brother too. He and Derek grew up together, so their families must have met many times before. There was no reason for them to be formal in how they addressed each other. Sure enough, no one questioned his way of addressing Derek, and Derek gave him a look that said he was on the right track. Robert nodded calmly. How long have you two been here? Just arrived a short while ago. Came back after having dinner, Derek replied, noticing a fruit basket on the nearby cabinet. He didn't need to guess who had sent it. Levi and Barry had known each other for over 10 years, and they'd worked together for several years now. Robert had met many people from both the Jiang and Liu families during that time. Robert held a positive impression of him, so it made sense he'd come by, both professionally and personally. We intercepted Levi's car on the highway and took in the driver. He was just a rideshare service driver, hired to move the vehicle without knowing what had happened. Based on the info he gave us, the booking was made under Levi's name, or rather, someone used his identity to set it up, since everyone was here and no outsiders were present. Robert shared what they'd uncovered so far. The driver wasn't involved in any wrongdoing. He was just part of a platform transaction. He never saw Levi at any point. The man claimed he felt too unwell to drive and directed him remotely via phone to retrieve the keys and start the car. Robert had looked into the lead Maverick provided about his ex-girlfriend, and this angle seemed worth exploring further. However, since it involved investigative details, Robert didn't share much more. What's the point of all this if they're not after money or gain? Maverick muttered casually. After Levi was taken care of, no one demanded ransom, and no one kept watch. Just left him alone in an abandoned warehouse. It made little sense. Robert said nothing but gave Barry a quick glance. The kind that comes from professional instinct. The real target wasn't Levi. Based on how quickly Derek passed along the information, they clearly already had things figured out. Barry and Derek both knew their limits. Robert chose not to press further. He stayed a little longer in the room before leaving. Not long after, Samuel stood up and said he needed to go back, making the three of them look at him in surprise. Maverick ran a hand over his rough short hair and asked, "You're leaving?" The one who pressured him to reveal Levi's whereabouts hadn't even been sitting long. Was he really leaving already? Samuel said, "What else could I do? I have work tomorrow." His tone was completely calm. On the surface, he just seemed like a friend paying a visit. Once that was done, it made sense to leave, but the other three all knew how much he cared for Levi. The decision to leave felt strangely out of character. Samuel paid no mind to their reactions, picked up his bag and jacket, stood up, then walked over to Derek and said, "Derek, you're driving me." Derek didn't refuse. He followed Samuel out of the hospital building. Samuel's car was parked a fair distance away, about a 10-minute walk from the main entrance. Weekend hospitals were much quieter than usual, with few people around. Samuel and Derek kept walking downhill together. As they walked, Samuel spoke up, "Derek, don't you have anything you want to say?" That comment came out of nowhere, and Derek could only think of Levi. He said, "Levi's situation is almost certainly William's doing. First, I thought he was trying to use Levi's safety to pressure my brother into giving up the project above us, but now it seems like a half-hearted effort. Everything's unclear and hard to figure out. William had both arrested someone and taken pictures, clearly sending a message, but he never revealed his real goal. Without any clear aim, everyone's guesses about him were hard to confirm or disprove. I know the project you're talking about. William's been under a lot of pressure lately. Haven't you noticed how quiet he's become? The elder from the Gu family gave him an ultimatum, and this project is his last chance to turn things around." Samuel sneered, his voice dripping with mockery. The old man can't control himself, and William isn't even his only son. Beyond the spotlight of public attention, William's struggles go far beyond business changes. He's caught in the tangled power battles within the Gu family. As the face publicly seen by all, he appears to have everything, but in reality, every move he makes could trigger a chain reaction. The public's attention has magnified his past actions. Now that things are starting to settle down, all the consequences from those earlier choices will come back to haunt him. Whether this incident with Levi is part of a planned storyline or William has something else in mind, it shows he's cornered and willing to take dangerous risks. Samuel and I have another connection, so even if I don't pay close attention, I still hear rumors about him from time to time. If he's truly pushed to the edge, he might just do anything. The balance between fan-made stories and the original plot was shifting, and with time, the storyline kept changing. Derek couldn't even be sure he knew everything anymore. Samuel slipped an arm around his shoulder and gave a cold smirk. "He's just a grasshopper in autumn. He's not worth your worry. That's not why I asked you here." Derek blinked, thoughts flashing through his mind. There shouldn't be anything between him and Samuel that needed hiding. They'd grown up together. Samuel might not remember every detail from the past, but he wouldn't distrust them. Derek said nothing further, turning his head slightly to look at Samuel, waiting quietly for what came next. He had a pair of beautiful almond-shaped eyes with light-colored irises. When the light hit them just right, they looked clear like amber and gave off an innocent, harmless look. Samuel recognized that expression well. In all the years they'd grown up together, Derek had always been someone they protected as a group. Whenever he made a mistake, or knew he'd done something wrong, he would look at them like this, trying to hide. "Derek," Samuel said, "how did we end up like this?" Derek tilted his head. "Aren't we always like this?" Samuel sighed. "Always like this? Am I the illegitimate one? Shouldn't that be William? Why am I the one now hiding in the shadows? When did William ever get the right to interfere with Sue family's business?" Samuel's voice was calm, yet carried an odd sense of absurdity. He was the legitimate son whose family had been broken by William's mother, only to wake up one day finding himself in the position of the other man's child. The woman who ruined his parents' marriage now wore the crown of a wealthy socialite, her son having already taken away his father, and now reaching into the Sue family's affairs. Though Samuel felt nothing but disgust toward that unfaithful man, he couldn't accept how facts had been twisted so completely. Worst of all, he'd become friends with Levi. Samuel was utterly confused, and Levi's sudden crisis only deepened his bewilderment. He couldn't recall when things had started to become so absurd. He just sat in silence for a long time, caught between frustration and disbelief. before finally accepting the situation. He came here to see Levi, hoping to clear up his doubts and move on from that awkward crush once and for all. But things didn't go as planned. At the hospital, he noticed subtle differences in Maverick and Robert's reactions, which hinted at something deeper. Maverick and Robert were barely affected. Their conversation felt natural, as if their memories remained unchanged. Then came Derek. Barry's behavior seemed to fall somewhere between the two. Samuel simply couldn't make sense of Barry giving up on Derek to care for a non-blood-related adopted sister. In his eyes, the things Barry had done before now seemed like blind madness. The good news was that even within those strange memories, Samuel hadn't supported Barry's unconditional pampering of Amelia. That's why he had called Derek out, to get answers from him. When going over everything again, Samuel could clearly sense how different Derek was. He broke free from the cycle of playing bodyguard, became an assistant, saved Daniel, and built his own path. This felt right, consistent with Samuel's memories, so he guessed Derek might have realized something was off much earlier. Derek was startled by Samuel's words, his eyes widening as he looked at him, trying to gauge whether they were true. "Mr. Chun, have you remembered everything?" Who am I?" Derek asked, his identity shift being the most dramatic and obvious of all. Samuel frowned, wondering who else it could be. Of course, he was their most cherished younger brother. Surely not some bodyguard now? Barry had been under a spell, which is why he made Derek work as his personal protector. Back then, Derek would get injured during training, and Barry would be furious. Sending him into such risky tasks? He must have lost his mind. Samuel mentally rolled his eyes, but quickly understood what Derek meant. He was asking which identity Samuel recognized. "You've been the younger brother I watched grow up," he said. "You're engaged to Barry, and Levi and I promised we'd be your groomsmen." Those words were enough. No further questioning was needed. Derek now knew for certain that Samuel had broken free from the influence of the world's consciousness. He was both surprised and delighted. "When did you finally remember?" Samuel said. "After you told me about your connection to the Jiang family, pieces of my past started coming back slowly, though they weren't clear at first." "You really do know what happened? What's going on now?" Samuel had been struggling with confusion for too long and desperately needed someone to provide answers. Derek didn't rush into explanations. Instead, he reached out to Snowball. "Will Chun get into danger if he learns the truth? Will the world consciousness target high?" Snowball replied, "No worries, he's no longer under the control of the fictional world." With Snowball's assurance, Derek felt much more at ease. Once he confirmed Samuel was safe, he explained the current situation to H. Still, he didn't reveal everything, carefully keeping Snowball's presence hid. Samuel sat frozen in silence. If he hadn't lived it himself, he wouldn't have believed such a confusing memory could actually be real. This whole situation seemed too strange to be TR. A bitter smile curled at the corner of his mouth. She's drawn to William, yet dismisses his background. Spent so much effort twisting facts. Clearly, she only loves her own imagined version of things. Reality isn't some fantasy world she can shape, letting William take over my assets. He doesn't even deserve the... Samuel had taken time to review his assets, and now he was determined to reclaim everything that had been taken from him. Derek saw Samuel was set on leaving, so he walked him to the car and worriedly said, "Don't get into a direct confrontation with William." Samuel chuckled. "I'm not that careless." Knowing about William's strange behavior, he certainly wouldn't rush in blindly, but whatever was off about William only seemed to affect him personally. Those around him weren't touched by it. Samuel started the car, then paused to roll up the window. He looked over at Derek, hesitated for a moment, and said, "Levi doesn't seem to be just unconscious. If he doesn't wake up, don't worry. I'll arrange for another doctor." The Gu family's questionable past was a burden both worlds had to deal with. And now that Samuel had recovered his memories, he knew even more. The Gu family has several gray market operations, including a specialized pharmaceutical facility located overseas, with its primary users not based in the domestic market, and only occasionally supplying products to the family itself. There's a wide range of such substances, and Barry was previously exposed before. Afterward, he remembered nothing at all. The local medical treatments are quite cautious, so Samuel will need to seek out an expert for proper care. After seeing Samuel off, Derek stood in the parking lot for a long time before turning to Snowball and asking, "Since my identity brought back memories for Brother Chun, could others remember too?" "That might be difficult," Snowball explained. "We overlooked something earlier. Samuel didn't appear in the early stages of this alternate world. But that's actually a positive sign. The alternate reality is starting to collapse. Samuel's storyline was originally meant to come much later. His appearance now only happened because Derek changed his own fate. By becoming an assistant, he ended up meeting a version of Samuel with the same role, which brought the character's arrival forward. At this point, Samuel had no established storyline to rely on, so he was hardly influenced by pre-written plotlines. His actions were more a result of personal choice than scripted events. Of course, his ability to remember stemmed from Derek's repeated changes to the storyline. Those alterations erased his original entry point, shattered his established plotline, and ultimately freed him from the narrative's grip. Hospital care didn't require many people, so Maverick volunteered to stay behind. Barry and Derek planned to rest overnight and head back after checking on Levi's condition tomorrow. They booked a hotel nearby, and as soon as they checked in, Derek received a call from Robert. "Hey, are you two heading back tomorrow? If not, come over for dinner. Your sister-in-law hasn't seen you in ages." Robert's wife was Derek's university senior, an outgoing and warm-hearted woman. Knowing Derek had arrived, she naturally wanted to show hospitality as the host. Derek glanced at Barry, who was already undressing and heading toward the bathroom, and smiled. "No thanks. This time we've got plans. We won't be coming over. Please tell your wife I said hello. Though, we'll definitely visit next time." Eating together would mean close proximity, and Derek wasn't confident he could make up stories without getting caught in front of two police officers. With the world feeling unstable right now, it was better not to pull them deeper into this situation. Robert knew Derek wasn't just being polite, so he didn't press further. The two brothers exchanged a few more casual remarks before ending the call. Derek put his phone away and walked over to Barry, asking, "Have you met my older brother before?" "Why would you ask that?" Barry replied, "You called him brother so naturally, like you've known him for years." Robert was a complete stranger to Barry, yet today at the hospital, he acted nothing like someone meeting a stranger for the first time. Barry casually pulled Derek into a hug and said, "We're in a relationship. Can't I call your brother?" Barry and Derek's relationship had progressed at lightning speed, moving from dating straight to meeting the family in record time. Samuel had found a new doctor for Levi who was highly skilled in toxicology. He came by car through the night to conduct a full-body exam and confirmed that Levi wasn't just unconscious. Maverick had stayed by Levi's side all night and was the first to lose his patience, saying, "Can you help him?" The doctor didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned to Barry. He already knew Levi's identity before arriving. Since he'd agreed to help Samuel, he would treat him, but only after setting his own conditions. "He's your personal assistant, someone who means a great deal to you. Before I can save him, I need you to do one thing for me." Barry responded without hesitation. "What do you want?" The doctor adjusted his glasses on the bridge of his nose. "If Gu family reaches out to negotiate with you, I need you to agree and get their antidote. He's been unwell for over a day now, and Gu family hasn't contacted me yet. It might be that they're waiting for you to reach out first." The doctor didn't give up on his idea. He knew how the Gu family operated. They wouldn't test anything on people until their overseas production lines were fully set up. Since the Gu family has brought this substance into play, they must also need data in return. The doctor scanned the hospital room, as if searching for any clue linked to the Gu family. Derek watched the scene before him and suddenly felt a strange, hard-to-explain sense of familiarity. "Snowball, why does this storyline feel so off right now?" Snowball remained calm and said, "The two worlds are competing with each other. In time, their storylines will begin to merge. What's happening now is a connection back to the original world." In the original story, Robert was in charge of investigating a case that eventually pointed to the Gu family, which became one of the key pieces of evidence leading to their downfall. However, in the original timeline, the victim wasn't Levi, it was you. Snowball shared the upcoming plot with Derek, and through Robert's involvement, the two worlds found a point of connection. The fragmented and scattered storylines began to form a new starting point at this intersection. Derek suddenly remembered. When he and Barry were engaged, Robert didn't show up. Instead, his sister-in-law came with the children. Derek had asked back then, and his sister-in-law said he was working on a case, and at the time, an informant had provided a meeting spot that made it impossible for him to leave. Before being separated by the world's consciousness, Derek hadn't gotten any closure on this matter. He felt a sense of familiarity. It was clearly influenced by the original world. Faced with Barry's silence, the doctor didn't rush to press for answers. Instead, he gave Barry plenty of time to think. When he judged it was the right moment, he continued, "How's your thinking coming along, Barry?" The eyes behind his glasses held a faint glint of coldness, and he looked utterly confident. Barry glanced at Derek but didn't fall into the trap. He said, "If you can save Levi, then you're capable of making the antidote. Why do you need the one from the Goo family? Or are you not confident in saving him?" Facing the challenge, the doctor quickly shot back, "Nonsense. I'm far better than those others. Saving someone? What's so hard? I have 3 methods that won't harm his body." Derek said with a compliment, "So you're really skilled then? But words alone don't prove anything." Derek's excitement faded quickly, as if he thought the claim was exaggerated. His expression showed clear doubt, hinting at skepticism about the doctor's professionalism. Working together with Barry in a back-and-forth manner, they stirred up the doctor's resistance, and he said, "I can save him right now, just wait and see." Before finishing his words, he was already heading toward the door, as if eager to prove his abilities. Since Samuel had invited him here, arrangements would naturally be made for his identity. The local doctors would cooperate with his treatment, and anything he needed could be obtained without issue. He yanked open the ward door, his foot already poised to step out when he suddenly recalled something, quickly pulled his foot back, and turned to face Barry and Derek. He adjusted his glasses and said, "Wait a minute. You two are playing me. If I heal him and you don't keep your promise, won't I be the one losing out?" Derek silently rolled his eyes. "This guy isn't as easy to fool as I thought." His eyes darted. A plan forming, he said, "That's not how it works. Actually, if you treat Levi first, we'll have an easier time getting the antidote." The doctor replied, "If I help you save him, they won't have any leverage over you. How could they possibly trade with you then? If you admit it's about pressure, and if I were part of the Goo family, I'd be in a strong position. Why would I even need to negotiate with you? I'd definitely push for my own advantage since you're the one depending on me." Derek calmly explained, "But if Levi wakes up, the Goo family ends up going around in circles and fails to reach their goal. That means control shifts right into our hands. Don't you see? We'd have a much stronger position at the table now." The doctor's only goal was the antidote. Derek's points were too complicated for him, and he didn't care about the negotiation between the parties. He had promised Samuel he'd save the man, so he couldn't back down at this point. But still feeling uneasy about giving in, he issued a warning. "I just want the antidote. How you get it is your problem. If you go back on your word, I can bring him back or keep him in bed." After speaking, the doctor left to arrange the treatment. Maverick muttered, "Didn't Samuel bring him in to help? Why does he have so many demands?" Derek shrugged. He had no idea either. He was also uncertain himself. Snowball said, "He used to be a pharmacist hired by the Goo family, but he was pushed out due to differing views. He's insisting on getting the antidote just to prove whether he or the people the Goo family hired are better. He doesn't have ill intentions. Just that kind of competitive mindset." Derek. How childish. The doctor wasn't one to make demands without reason. He had the skills to back them up. Under his care, Levi slowly regained consciousness within just a few hours. In the first minutes after coming to, he looked completely confused about where he was. Glancing at the people gathered around the bed, he furrowed his brow, and when his gaze landed on Barry, he seemed hesitant to speak. Maverick waved his hand in front of Levi's face and said, Hey, aren't you gonna be out of it?" Feeling the doubt, the doctor stepped forward with a slight frown and gave Levi another check. Chin lifted. "No damage, perfectly fine." As if on cue, Levi pushed Maverick's hand away, his eyes flicking between Derek and Barry with a strange expression. Derek took a picture of him to send to Samuel, adding the message, "All safe." Barry asked with concern what had happened. Levi's pale lips stayed tightly closed as he stared at Barry's face, lost in thought. Beep, friendly reminder. The key character Levi has altered his fate, and the storyline is deviating. The sudden notification from Snowball echoed in Derek's mind. As he held his phone to send a message to Samuel, he paused, then looked up at Levi. Barry's gaze grew shadowed, as if he was beginning to sense why Levi seemed so off. Could this mean he's remembering everything from before? That he's back on the original path? Isn't Levi's critical moment supposed to happen much later? Derek asked. Snowball replied, "In the original story, things were meant to unfold after Amelia finishes college. But since that part of the timeline is missing, the plot has accelerated dramatically." Derek's heart sank as he turned to look at Barry. Levi's critical moment happened earlier than expected. What about Barry? Could he be? Derek's fingers trembled slightly, and he dared not continue the thought. Levi's recovery was quickly relayed to William through Samuel. The man reporting the situation hadn't even left yet. He still held his open champagne, and the news came so fast that his celebration seemed utterly foolish. The living room fell silent. After a long pause, William angrily threw down his glass. Wasn't this supposed to be a newly developed one? This is it. William glared at his assistant beside him, furious. He had planned to use this as leverage in negotiations with Barry, expecting Barry to come begging for help. But this was the last thing he'd anticipated. The assistant was now drenched in sweat, completely caught off guard by how things had turned out. If he couldn't give William a satisfactory explanation, no matter how long he'd served at his side, William wouldn't let him off easily. At this point, the only option was to blame it on those people overseas. They're far away and out of reach. William wouldn't actually go chasing after them. The assistant made up his mind, steadying himself before saying, "William, I take full responsibility. I assumed they were trustworthy and didn't think to check. Never expected them to hand over substandard material. They're not just misleading me. They clearly don't respect me at all." William narrowed his brows, recalling how the overseas operations had been handed over to others by the old man. The elder claimed they were family, trusted allies, but William knew full well they were his illegitimate son. Because of his repeated mistakes earlier, the old man had grown displeased with him and took the opportunity to bring in his scattered illegitimate children into the business. He thought William didn't know, but William simply chose not to argue about such matters. Since the Gu family had plenty of resources, as long as those people stayed out of his way, he treated them like extra dogs. Ignoring their presence was enough. They shouldn't have done this under any circumstances. Not when it came to something that belonged to him. Did they really think the old man's protection was an all-powerful shield? William tugged at his tie, adjusted his watch, then grabbed the assistant by the collar and said, "You've got one chance to make it right. Come with me. Bring your team." Seeing William's fierce expression, the assistant felt a chill in his chest. "William, are you going overseas? But what about that bidding project?" William gave a cold glance, and the assistant felt as though his breath had been cut off. Too frightened to say another word, William knew exactly what was going on with the bidding project. Those people had accepted his favors and were in his hands, so they dared not play games with him. He only needed to return within 3 days to sign the contract, and 3 days would be more than enough to deal with those people overseas. The assistant didn't want to cause trouble. Seeing William's firm decision, he reluctantly went ahead to arrange the private jet. Levi came too, and the doctor started urging Barry to get an antidote for him. Barry appreciated Levi's trust and wasn't misleading him, but this wasn't as simple as the doctor claimed. Just going straight to William would not solve it. Barry looked into William's recent movements and consulted Samuel for more information, only to learn that William had gone overseas. He couldn't help but feel surprised. There was one thing Barry and Derek couldn't figure out. William had clearly intended to use Levi as part of his plan, yet he ended up letting the situation go without consequence. If the doctor's arrival caused him to miss his chance, then what was his original goal? Was it the bidding project? But at the scene that day, William remained calm and composed. showing no sign of concern. Instead, he smirked at Barry with a look of confidence, as if he had already won. If he really wanted to block the project, it wouldn't make sense for him to have allowed Barry to be present at the bidding event. Besides the project, what else about Barry could possibly be worth risking a life over? He's always been arrogant and unpredictable. Jumping from one idea to another isn't unusual, Samuel said on the phone. In any case, Levi was safe and sound, so at least he didn't have to worry about William using him as a pawn. As for the doctor, Samuel had a good understanding of him. He knew this competitive attitude came from feeling overlooked in the past. He believed he was better than those people and was stubbornly determined to prove himself. Samuel told Barry not to worry. He knew how to handle the doctor. Besides, he'd already finished his current tasks and was on his way. Just exited the highway, and would be at the hospital in about half an hour. When Levi heard Samuel was coming, his expression shifted slightly, but no one noticed his unease. Samuel first asked about Levi's condition. When their eyes met, Levi awkwardly rubbed his nose, as if suddenly burned by fire, quickly looking away and avoiding Samuel's gaze. Clearly uneasy, Samuel recognized that look all too well, his heart giving a sudden jolt. Without showing any reaction, he turned slightly away from Levi and began calming the doctor. "Andrew, wouldn't it have been easier to ask me for the antidote? Unfortunately, I can't help this time. Your family hasn't developed an effective one yet, which is why I asked you to step in." As Samuel spoke, Andrew's usual composed expression flickered. He adjusted his glasses and tried to sound calm. "They've really sunk this low? Complete amateurs. There's no comparison with you," Samuel said, feeding him praise with a smooth smile. Andrew felt pleased by the flattery, his stern expression hiding a faint smile. "Those people combined couldn't match me. Here, I'm giving your life back to you in full spirit." Andrew was especially kind toward Samuel, and he believed whatever Samuel said without ever questioning it. Under Samuel's flattering words, Nicholas left with a sense of satisfaction, no longer troubled by the matter of the antidote. Derek leaned closer to Samuel and whispered, "You're serious? There's no antidote?" "If there were, we could still get one for him." Samuel shook his head. "I'm not making this up. I really don't have one." The head of the Gu family was deeply hypocritical. He had been the one to start the affair, and after it came out, Isabella insisted on divorce. He pretended to be heartbroken and did everything according to her wishes. After the divorce, he would occasionally reach out to Samuel with concern, claiming to make up for past mistakes, trying hard to appear as a caring father. Samuel didn't fall for his act, but that didn't stop him from using the man's false image to serve his own goals, and sometimes even causing William trouble. This time, Samuel had already tested the waters with the Gu family head. After so many years of dealing with him, he could easily tell when the man was lying or telling the truth. Samuel had taken care of all his work matters. This trip was purely for dedicated care. With him here, Derek and Barry could safely go back. Maverick had planned to leave, but at the last moment he hesitated and decided to stay. With Samuel around, there was no point in him being a burden, so he stayed at a hotel instead, letting Samuel call him if needed. He'd be right there. The lively hospital room quieted down by afternoon, leaving only Samuel and Levi. Samuel was peeling an apple for Levi, then cut off a piece and handed it over, giving him a half-smile that seemed to hold more than words. Levi felt uneasy under his gaze, his hand hovering uncertainly. Samuel said, "Ex-girlfriend?" Levi's hand twitched. Samuel added, "You're such a straight-laced guy. I never thought you'd be the kind to hold on to old feelings. How did I miss that?" Levi held the apple tightly, unable to pull his hand back. He looked up at Samuel with a slightly awkward smile. He really felt wronged by all that had happened. He couldn't even make sense of this memory himself. Samuel laughed. "I heard you're being bothered by your ex-girlfriend again. Guess you're more of a sentimental type than I thought. How did I miss that romantic side of you?" The apple in Levi's hand suddenly lost its appeal. He felt desperate, quickly moving toward the edge of the bed as he tried to explain to Samuel. Samuel pulled out the chair and moved it farther away, then started eating the apple, leaning casually against the back of the chair, one leg crossed over the other. He said, "What's up? I'm not your girlfriend." Don't come that close. The words, my sweetie, came out with a sharp edge, reminding Samuel of all the times Levi had been slow to understand. Levi looked like he was about to cry. Baby, I'm sorry. Even though he didn't know what had caused the issue, apologizing right away seemed like the safe move. Samuel let out a quiet laugh and wasn't fooled. That apology came too fast. Feels totally unconvincing. Do you even know what happened? You're apologizing without understanding. Whatever went wrong, it's my fault for not paying attention to you, Levi said firmly, taking full responsibility. Unlike the fan fiction portrayals, in real life he was the one chasing after Samuel. Now that Samuel had been caught off guard, it made sense he'd be upset and acting out. Completely understandable. Levi was more than happy to smooth things over while also asking seriously, what exactly happened? Samuel shot him a sideways glance, slowly taking bites of his apple, and said with a smirk, you want to know? Levi nodded, without figuring this out. He'd have no idea what set Samuel off next time. Samuel kept him on edge, refusing to give a straight answer, and simply sat nearby, calmly watching him grow anxious. The world had settled back into order, but that didn't mean the story was over. Some dangers often lie just before the end. Derek and Barry drove home as dusk fell, having eaten dinner out beforehand. Levi's situation made Derek more cautious. He stared at the miniature landscape model they'd created when buying the house, recalling its security features. In this fictional world, the presence of the Liu family was downplayed, as was the overall setting. Derek lived in an era with advanced technology and where same-sex marriage was legal. As the heir to the Liu family, Barry had faced numerous dangers throughout his life, and the bodyguards around him were all highly skilled professionals. These past days, living with Derek, he'd deliberately reduced the number of people around him. That wasn't a positive sign. It was time to get his security team back in place. Derek thought it and said straight out, brother, you should have more people around you these past few days. Barry answered without hesitation, got it. With William overseas, things have been quiet for the past couple of days. Levi had been resting in the hospital for 2 days, but ended up feeling restless and bored, so he checked out early to return to work. Samuel and Maverick stayed close by and didn't come back. In the meantime, Robert interviewed him once. They've tracked the movement of the criminal group, but because it's connected to other cases, police are holding off on taking action. Derek wasn't surprised when he heard the news. Now, besides his regular work schedule, Derek was keeping a close eye on Barry's movements to make sure there were no risks around him. He went to pick up Barry as usual after work and waited in Barry's office for him to finish up. Someone approached Barry to report on the project, their thin face clouded with worry. Barry, we didn't win the bid. The other side chose Lingfeng Group. Barry's pen paused mid-sentence as he looked up at the project manager, not particularly surprised by the outcome. Perhaps William's recent odd behavior had given him a hint. Now it all made sense. The project manager was frustrated and angrily accused the other side of using unfair tactics. Derek overheard part of it. Could this be William's home field advantage? Snowball said, yes, but he hasn't signed the project yet. There's still a chance. Derek's eyes lit up. Tell me more, Snowball said. In the story, Amelia didn't just cause trouble for Barry. She also messed things up for William, but back then, it was William's scene. He had the advantage of being the main character and always managed to fix everything in the end. Now it's different. William went overseas to deal with his illegitimate son, but Amelia secretly boarded his private plane, hoping to use the chance to escape his control. Instead, she dragged William into danger. Now both of them are missing. Derek raised an eyebrow. Your description sounds oddly familiar. In later fan-made stories, something similar happened. Only in those versions, William broke up with Amelia to secure full control over the family, saying he did it to protect her. She was heartbroken and vowed she would never forgive him. Then she went alone to a bar to drown her sorrows, and by sheer bad luck, fell into an enemy's trap and was captured to pressure William. William went alone to rescue Amelia, and the two ended up stranded on a remote island after a crisis. They faced life-threatening dangers together and opened up deeply to each other. In the original story, this ordeal became a turning point that brought them closer. But right now, the world's forced storyline only adds complications for William. Snowball let out a light laugh, his tone tinged with amusement. William didn't handle the contract arrangements properly. This deal was entirely under his control. Switching the signing party at this stage might leave the other side unwilling to accept it. The bidding company only recognizes William's commitment if they switch to someone else without reaching him, and William denies responsibility later. Wouldn't all their efforts be for nothing? Right now, both sides are at an impasse, and since William can't be reached for the moment, there's still room to maneuver. But the longer it drags on, the more unpredictable things become. Hey, have Barry's team revise the earlier proposal and try again. In your original path, this project was meant for Huan Yu. The original path refers to what Derek and his group were supposed to experience after being pushed aside. This project was the key moment leading to William's downfall. But in the fan-made world, it's now being used against Barry. With both worlds now blending, the consciousness of the fan-made realm was mechanically pushing forward the plot without awareness, giving Barry a real chance to reclaim his destiny. Derek thought it would be a pity to give up so easily. He stood up and walked toward Barry, saying, "From what I know, William isn't in the country yet, and the contract hasn't been signed. There's still time. Brother, why not try once more?" Barry closed his pen cap. This project was one he absolutely had to secure, and even without Derek's inner thoughts, he wouldn't let go. "Have your team work overtime, fix the issues, and get it back to me before tomorrow's closing time." Barry gave the instruction, signaling the manager could leave. Then he dialed an internal line, asking his assistant to arrange a meeting with the head of the bidding company. What belongs to him, he won't hand over lightly to William. William's disappearance was serious. No one in the company could reach him, and the project they'd agreed on stalled at the contract stage. No matter how Lingfeng's team tried to negotiate, the other side insisted on William appearing in person. While Lingfeng Group was scrambling to find him, Barry successfully met with the head of the bidding company. Since it was a work meeting, Derek didn't go with Barry. Instead, he waited for him at a different spot in the same restaurant. The dinner lasted nearly 2 hours. By the time the guest left, it was evening. The city lights had come on and dusk had settled over the streets. Barry had had a drink, and when he came out to find Derek, his face was slightly flushed. He sat down beside Derek and leaned his head against his shoulder. The restaurant's air conditioning was strong, and the recent rain had cooled the air. There was no sticky heat, so sitting together felt comfortable. The restaurant prioritized privacy, and Derek had chosen a seat in the corner. An ideal spot where they wouldn't be noticed by others. Derek handed Barry a glass of ice water and asked, "How did the talk go?" Barry took a sip from the glass through Derek's hand and said, "As long as the reward is big enough. Turning against them isn't surprising. William mainly relied on pressure and temptation. Barry could do the same. The key difference between them was that Barry stayed calmer and always left some room for others, never forcing someone into a corner right from the start. At this point, the situation had reached a standstill, and the other side was also looking for an escape route. Since Barry offered to ease their burden, they naturally seized the chance. Barry rested against Derek for a moment, then sat up and looked at him. The young man had striking features. Beautiful eyes that glowed like amber. Whenever he glanced sideways at Barry, there was always a gentle smile in his gaze. An honest, heartfelt affection. Derek didn't actually need to be here for this dinner meeting. Barry would return after finishing the talk, with guards and drivers nearby. Still, Derek couldn't help but worry. After Levi stepped out of the main storyline, his supervision over Barry became stricter than ever. Sometimes Barry couldn't help wondering, why him specifically? He could feel everything was so familiar, yet he just couldn't recall anything. Charlotte's care, Ezra's quiet relief, his parents' occasional remarks, and the reports from Mateo's old estate. These were all people close to him, living their own lives in their respective timelines. Only he was stuck in a loop, going through daily routines while having no memory of the past, unnoticed by others, or perhaps deliberately overlooked. If Derek hadn't come back to find him, how long would he have stayed trapped like this? Would it really end up as fate had set, until death? Derek, Barry gently brushed a strand of hair from Derek's temple, saying, "There's a small team-building event at work this week. Family members are welcome. Would you like to come with me?" Barry called it a small gathering, but there were several hundred people. Company rented an entire farmstead. The place was spacious, surrounded by hills and streams, peaceful and serene, able to host over 1,000 guests. Huan Yu's event was meant for relaxation, with no mandatory activities. Some employees even brought their children along. Barry rarely attends such events, but this time he came to help Derek unwind. He's been feeling too overwhelmed lately because of recent stress. The farm offered a variety of leisure activities, with an orchard in the back hills and a man-made lake in front, where lotus flowers bloomed beautifully, occasionally dotted by one or two small boats drifting across. It was quite warm today, so Derek didn't feel like moving around much. He asked for 2 fishing sets and pulled Barry toward the lake to go fishing. Along the lakeside stood a row of covered walkways. The breeze sweeping across the water brought a refreshing coolness. Derek picked a spot far from the crowd, expertly attaching bait and casting his line, watching the float steadily rest on the surface, sending out gentle ripples. He couldn't help but recall their last time fishing by the sea. Since Barry wasn't very experienced, he patiently guided Derek. Close enough that a quiet tension built between them, as if just one step more would lead to something unspoken. Derek set down his fishing rod and sat on the window seat, watching Barry fiddle with the line. Then suddenly he asked, "When did you start liking me?" Barry glanced sideways, his brow slightly furrowed, as if puzzled by the question. What kind of liking was Derek asking about? Was it now or in the past? Barry's feelings weren't love at first sight. It wasn't clear when he learned to care. Maybe it was a fleeting glance, maybe an honest moment of courage, or perhaps the bravery to keep coming back. Love grew slowly through little moments together, until the time came to speak. It had already filled his heart. Once he started talking, he couldn't hold it back. Barry unconsciously gave in and held back, letting instinct guide him when things weren't yet clear between them. He naturally protected Derek without thinking. Barry turned his gaze away, cast the fishing hook into the water, and didn't answer directly. Instead, he turned it back on Derek. "What about you?" Derek let out a soft laugh, facing the shimmering lake, and said, "It's not that I fell for you on some particular day. I like you every single day, past, present, and future." Whether it was the Derek who had lost his memory or the one searching for it, in every phase of life, he seemed fated to meet Barry and fall for him. Aside from those years spent at the orphanage, there were traces of Barry everywhere in his life. "What if I said we're meant to be together? Would you believe me?" Derek asked, his eyes bright with quiet intensity. Barry could almost feel that warmth. Meant to be together was truly a beautiful idea, like a stone dropped into a lake. Ripples spread outward, gently reaching deep within. Barry said, "I believe it, Derek. Thank you for coming into my world. Thank you for choosing me with such steady faith." Never wavering, Derek smiled slightly, pleased by the reply. "You're welcome." Looking forward to what's ahead, joy danced in his eyes and brow, but as he kept smiling, a hint of sadness crept in, fleeting, too brief to catch. A fish bit the hook. The float sank suddenly. Derek lifted the rod and reeled in. But cleverly, the fish leapt free just above the surface. Derek stared at his empty hook, brushing off the quiet disappointment, muttered a soft "too bad," then seemed fired up with renewed determination for another round. Fishing takes patience, and you also need to be ready for a blank catch. No matter how many fish are in the lake, bad luck can still mean coming home empty-handed. This is terrible. I must have picked the wrong day to go out. Derek stared at his empty bucket, puzzled. The same spot, the same bait. Why could Barry return with so many fish? Derek glanced at Barry's bucket, where the fish pressed close together, bubbling as if mocking his empty hook. Derek wasn't about to let this slide. He clenched his teeth and muttered, "With so many fish, we could make all kinds of delicious meals." A faint smile flickered in Barry's eyes. "Whatever you say." They walked toward the shore, chatting as they went. Derek began listing different ways to prepare fish, but his voice trailed off when he noticed a crowd gathered on land. People shouting over one another, gesturing wildly, clearly arguing fiercely. and among them, someone was covering their face and sobbing. Derek had sharp eyes and sensed something was off. He exchanged a glance with Barry and quickened their pace toward the shore. The assistant to Barry's executive office was among the crowd, but Levi wasn't there. Levi normally handled Barry's schedule. His expression was serious as he comforted a worried female colleague. Kids are curious and might have wandered off somewhere. Don't panic, we've got cameras at every exit, so they can't be lost. That's right. The whole place is booked by the company. Only staff and us are here, no strangers around. Nothing bad could have happened. We've already reached out to the boss to check the camera footage. If the child leaves the area, we'll be notified right away. The people gathered around the woman were all from her department. Close co-workers who had worked together for a while. Now they naturally stepped in to help. Some offered comfort, others shared ideas, and several had already started searching on their own. As Derek and Barry approached, the assistant noticed them and hurried over. Barry gave a quick glance, and the assistant immediately explained what had happened. The situation wasn't serious, but it wasn't minor either. Someone from the team had taken their child out to play, and the child hadn't come back. Their personal smartwatch wouldn't answer calls, and the parents had searched the entire farm with no sign of them. They were now deeply worried. Given how young the child is, even if they were just playing around, it's unlikely they'd have wandered far from the estate. Still, to be safe, after coordinating a check within the estate, the assistant arranged for someone to drive out and search along the main road nearby. Fortunately, the farm was surrounded by rivers and hills, with only one main road leading in and out, making the search relatively straightforward. At this age, children usually don't go far without their parents' permission. Have you checked with any trusted adults or older kids they're close to? And did the couple have any issues with other coworkers recently? After understanding the situation, Derek looked over at the group gathered around the worried couple. Their expressions varied. Some were clearly concerned, others offered suggestions, while a few seemed to be just there out of curiosity. Life is full of different kinds of people. Not everyone is kind-hearted. There are cameras everywhere here. Any action would leave some trace, so it's unlikely anyone would take the risk of doing something wrong in such a place. Still, we should check the overlooked spots. The child is so young. Maybe they're taking a nap? The assistant lowered his head, thinking, then said, "I'll go ask for more details." Derek nodded slightly, giving him a signal to get on with it. If a child were actually missing during the company's team-building event, the impact on the company would be severe. Barry fixed his gaze directly on Derek, his brows drawn tightly together. As Derek instructed his assistant to keep an eye on acquaintances, scattered glimpses flashed through his mind. Faint echoes of memories from his childhood. Barry pressed his lips together. The rush of memory came too fast for him to grasp clearly, leaving him slightly lightheaded instead. Derek looked at him with confusion, tilting his head and asking, "What's wrong?" "No." Barry had just started to speak when a cheerful voice rang out nearby. "Found him. Found the kid. He's sleeping inside the car." The joy of finding the child brought calm to the chaos, drawing everyone's attention forward. Derek turned his head too. Someone said, "How could he sleep in the car on a day like this?" The bus windows were left open to help cool things down inside. The driver called out from among the crowd. Derek watched as people walked toward the parking area, then grabbed Barry's hand and said, "The child's found. Great news. Come on, let's go take a look too." Barry didn't really want to go, but seeing Derek so happy, he chose not to refuse. He felt glad for the others instead. They stayed at a distance, simply watching as the child's mother hugged him tightly while crying and laughing. She scolded him gently with a few firm words, her hand raised in mild reprimand before landing on his back, then melted into tears of relief. "You little rascal, how could you just vanish like that and sneak into the car without a word? Do you have any idea how worried your parents were searching for you? What if something had happened to you? How would your mom even cope?" Woken by the noise and looking completely confused, the child stared at the circle of adults around him, unsure what was happening. Startled by his mother's crying after a light reprimand, his eyes turned red, and soon he began to cry too. The onlookers chuckled softly, smiling as they comforted each other that it was just a close call with no real harm done. "The important thing is he's safe now," There's no need to be too hard on him. The assistant, who had just become a father himself and had returned from checking the security footage, stood behind Barry, moved by the scene. He quietly sighed. It breaks your heart to see how deeply parents care. Even a brief separation sends them into panic. If something truly happened, it would feel like the world had ended for them. Barry's heart ached with each pulse, his expression growing heavy. The scene of a family hugging their child, crying and laughing together, felt strangely familiar. Mother's tears, father's lingering unease, and the ease in everyone else's demeanor. He seemed to have lived through something like this before. The floodgates of memory cracked open, and a rush of images poured into his mind. Not clear like a carousel, but swirling like colors in a kaleidoscope. Vivid and dazzling, yet blurred and indistinct. Barry felt dizzy, his chest tight as if crushed under a massive weight. The assistant's words that followed sounded distant, like whispers from faraway clouds. Distorted and unreal, Barry could hear his own heartbeat. Thump, thump, thump. Barry! Everything spun before Barry's eyes. He heard the assistant's alarmed voice, and his body fell backward, beyond his control. He didn't fall onto the scorching concrete ground, but was caught securely by someone. A sudden wave of voices filled his ears, yet he couldn't make sense of any of them. Faintly, a clear and youthful voice emerged. Brother, make sure you come pick me up, okay? Barry sat listlessly on a chair, surrounded by several bodyguards, while his family was furious over the discovery of someone misusing company funds. Barry glanced out the window. This year's winter had come early. The leaves were dry and yellow, swirling in the wind before falling one by one. He didn't know if Derek had made it home yet, since his parents were worried. Barry hadn't waited for him after school and came back first, but before leaving, Barry had asked the kindergarten teacher to only let Derek go if Charlotte came to pick him up. Considering the time, the kindergarten had already let out. Maybe he'd see Derek soon. That would be nice. Thinking about Derek made Barry feel happy all over. But why did things end up like that? Mia, didn't you say you couldn't pick up Derek today? But when I went to get him, the kindergarten teacher said he'd been taken by your team. Charlotte and Ezra hadn't found Derek at the kindergarten. They drove straight back, heading straight for the Liu family residence. The atmosphere at the Liu family was tense. Hearing Charlotte's voice, Mia quickly stepped forward, her expression full of surprise. No way, Barry took the afternoon off today. We didn't send anyone. Charlotte froze in shock, eyes welling up with tears. She covered her mouth in disbelief, her voice breaking with urgency. The teacher said it was your secretary, a familiar face, so she let Derek go. They didn't come home. Only the butler, driver, and Michael's secretary had ever picked up the child from kindergarten. The teacher recognized them, so she didn't think twice. It wasn't until Charlotte arrived to pick up Derek that something felt wrong. Hearing the secretary's name, everyone at the Liu family reacted with alarm. Mia already understood what had happened. Barry jumped off his chair and hurried over to Charlotte, anxious. How could the teacher let Derek go? I told you I'd wait for you. A dark sense of dread surged through Charlotte. She glanced around nervously, her voice trembling. Something must have happened, right? Mia looked at her with a heavy heart and motioned for the butler to take Barry away. The Liu family's secretary was caught embezzling funds. Charlotte's vision went dark. Her body swayed slightly. Thankfully, Ezra was right beside her and steadied her with a firm grip. Barry, still so young, squeezed through the crowd, needing to tilt his head up just to see everyone's faces clearly. At that moment, the adults in his eyes seemed tall and unshakable. But when the news about the secretary came out, tied to Derek's whereabouts, those figures crumbled like collapsing mountains. As Charlotte staggered, they all seemed to shrink one by one, and the living room erupted into chaos. Barry sensed something was wrong, even if he didn't fully understand what it was. But he knew with certainty that this had something to do with Derek. He still wanted to ask more, but at that moment the butler lifted him up. His view rose above the crowd, taking in everything around, yet his heart sank deeper and deeper. Barry quickly realized the secretary had been targeting him, but since he was already home, the kidnappers missed their chance and instead took Derek. They already had a sum of stolen money and weren't short on funds. Their demand was for the Liu family to stop reporting the crime so they could leave in safety. The Liu and Jiang families were close allies, and with Derek now in their hands, both sets of adults gathered to discuss a plan. Though some people offered selfish or unwise suggestions, the elder generations quickly put them down. They were extremely careful, but still failed to rescue Derek. When the bad news arrived, Charlotte lost consciousness for a moment, and in Barry's memory, she cried for a long time. The pain of losing her son shattered her composed exterior. Loss was something no amount of wealth could ever make up for. Barry experienced the reality of separation forever for the first time, but he refused to accept it. He hadn't seen Derek's body. Everything was just secondhand information passed from others. What if someone had managed to save him? Barry refused to give up. He asked elders, teachers, and all the older men he knew. Anyone who might help him learn how to find someone. It didn't matter if it was like searching for a needle in an ocean. As long as Derek was still alive, there had to be some trace of him somewhere in the world. All his effort paid off. Barry found him, but his younger brother no longer remembered him. The look in his eyes was so distant, as if Barry were a complete stranger he'd never met before. Those round and bright eyes had lost their shine. He had forgotten everything. Didn't even know who he was anymore, let alone how to get back home. It's all right, Barry thought. It doesn't matter if you don't remember. It wasn't something special anyway. From now on, I'll be your anchor in this world. I'll fill it with memories, the present and the future. Barry made a silent promise to himself. He stayed by the boy's side as he grew up, from close companionship to deep emotional connection, through youthful innocence to mature understanding. He believed this would last forever, but somehow, without realizing it, he lost him again. Carried along by fate before he even knew what had happened, he kept telling Derek who he was, urging him to remember. In the end, it was he who had forgotten everything. Derek, Barry murmured softly in his dream. When he opened his eyes again, he was lying in the farm's restroom, a cool compress on his forehead. The room's air conditioning set very low. Derek sat on the floor with his back against the bed, talking and bonding with Samuel. Barry sat up, hearing the movement. Derek turned to look, then pushed himself up and settled onto the edge of the bed. How do you feel? Is your head still dizzy? Barry watched his lips moving, couldn't quite catch what he was saying, then reached out and gently pressed the side of his face. Derek looked puzzled and said, "You're a bit overheated. Doctors already checked on you." Barry shook his head. He felt great, better than ever. But what puzzled him was why Derek's system hadn't reacted to his recovery. When Levi regained his memories, the system did respond. Or is the system treating him differently, keeping his situation hidden? "Derek," Barry said, staring at the faint red mark on Derek's cheek, gently tracing it with his fingertip as if touching something precious he'd just found again. Derek felt a sudden wave of awkward warmth. What was this person acting like after just one nap? It was like he'd turned into someone completely different. Unsure, Derek pulled out his phone and checked the contact list, planning to have his assistant call a doctor for another checkup. Barry noticed the small gesture and gently pressed down on Derek's phone, his palm covering the screen. "Derek, look at me," he said. Derek looked up at him. Though there was an ice pack on his forehead, it didn't take away from his striking presence. The hair falling over his brow softened the sharpness of his features. Derek leaned in without hesitation, moving close and cupping Barry's face. "I see you. You're beautiful. Want a kiss?" The tone was gentle and teasing, laced with warmth and joy, just like the countless days before. Barry's heart raced, and he pulled Derek close into his arms. Perhaps he had long understood the truth of life, loving someone despite all obstacles. And the return of memories didn't stir up any deep waves in Barry's heart. Instead, there was a quiet sense of relief mixed with lingering worry. "Derek, I think." Boom! A sudden thunderclap echoed from the clear sky, startling both people inside the room. Derek looked up at the window. The once cloudless sky had quietly been covered by thick, heavy clouds piling one after another, quickly darkening half the heavens. The sun's light was swallowed by the clouds, and a faint gloom settled over the world. "Didn't mention it would rain today," Derek muttered, puzzled. The thunder cut off Barry mid-sentence. Then the assistant's call came through. The team-building event was nearly wrapped up, and everyone was boarding the vehicles in an orderly manner. The assistant asked about Barry's condition, and Derek said, "It's fine. Go ahead without us. We'll catch up shortly." The sky looked troubling. Rain would be a hassle, so Derek gave the assistant a quick instruction, then turned back to Barry and gently checked his temperature, asking, "Should we consider going to the clinic?" That wasn't right at all. On the way back, it started raining heavily. The downpour turned the roads into a continuous curtain of water, and the windshield wipers swung back and forth without pause. Derek muttered that something felt off. These past few days, the weather had been unusually erratic, with sudden rain appearing out of clear skies, arriving without warning. As Barry listened to Derek's complaints and watched the heavy rain, a shadow passed through his mind. The driver dropped them off at home by evening. The rain in the city had eased up, with the sun peering through the clouds, casting a golden glow. The rainfall seemed even lighter. Derek carried the luggage from the trunk and climbed the steps, his eyes settling on Barry as he did so. Barry had been unusually quiet throughout the trip. When Derek suggested going to a clinic, he refused without explanation. After discreetly having Snowball run a check, Derek felt reassured when it confirmed Barry's physical condition was normal. The home's air circulation system removed the warmth, leaving the room pleasantly cool. Derek had just set down his suitcase when the door clicked open. Barry walked in and wrapped his arms around him. A soft murmur reached his ears. "Derek, I'm back." Derek froze for a brief moment. He turned to face Barry, meeting his deep gaze. Dark and calm like the ocean, bottomless at first glance. "You remember everything now?" Derek asked, his expression filled with shock and uncertainty. Barry replied, "Most of my memories have come back." There were still some parts in his memory that felt unclear, suggesting not everything had returned yet, but the general outline was now clear. To Derek, this came as a sudden turn of events. Overwhelmed with surprise and joy, his eyes sparkled brightly, as if 1,000 words were caught in his throat. He longed to pour them out freely, but the rush of emotion made it hard to choose just the right ones. Because Snowball had reminded him to wait for Barry to remember on his own, he'd kept holding back again and again. Now, that nervous tension finally eased. The sudden joy left him lightheaded, and he wrapped his arms tightly around Barry. They held each other close, their silhouettes reflected on the glass. At that moment, a bright white flash of lightning streaked across the window, followed by a thunderclap echoing high in the sky. After the booming sound, heavy rain poured down, and the entire city was wrapped in strong winds and torrential showers. The nighttime rain covered everything. Raindrops landed on the terrace in a steady, rhythmic pattern, like a beautiful melody. Derek and Barry sat down to have an honest conversation, clearing up everything that had happened lately. Unlike Samuel, when speaking to Barry about these things, Derek was more detailed, and naturally, it included their arguments. Long ago, Derek had already heard Barry's apology, though Barry himself had forgotten. That night, Barry whispered the same regret again close to his ear. He wasn't sure whether Derek had done it on purpose or by accident, but he knew Derek had left the mess for him to handle before rushing back to school. He admitted he'd let a small personal bias influence his editing choice, which is why he hadn't deleted that clip. He had actually considered asking Derek about it, but got distracted by other matters and simply forgot. Derek had already learned the truth from Snowball. He felt regretful for acting out in the moment, and he hadn't meant to hide his injury. He just felt guilty after promising Barry he'd be careful, only to get hurt so soon, making him afraid he couldn't explain it properly. They cared deeply for each other, so whenever problems arose, they instinctively thought about how the other person would feel. Sometimes keeping things quiet wasn't out of deceit. It was just to spare the other from sadness. We promised we'd never forget each other. Barry clung to their promise from youth. As soon as he spoke those words, Derek was reminded of the child who often followed him in dreams. Persistent like a shadow, calling out the same way, "Don't forget me." Derek sensed a hint of childlike playfulness in Barry, something different from his usual composed demeanor, and couldn't help but chuckle. He defended himself with a smile. "I never forgot you. I fought hard with the author on your behalf." when the author removed Derek and turned Barry into a mere functionary. It was Derek who kept speaking up again and again. With his pen and instinct, he defended Barry, breathing life into the words, shaping Barry's presence in the story. The long nights passed, and as Derek spoke about the days they were trapped, he no longer felt weighed down by sorrow. Derek shared a great deal with him, but left out one thing: the system. When he finished speaking, Derek curled into Barry's arms and fell into a deep, peaceful sleep. He woke up the next morning to bright sunlight high in the sky, with clear blue skies stretching endlessly. Barry had already gotten up, and the space beside him on the bed had been empty for quite some time. Derek rested in bed for a while, then got up to freshen up before heading downstairs. Barry was sitting on the sofa reading today's financial news. William had been brought back, but due to his own mistakes, the deal that was originally set for him ended up in Barry's hands. The Gu family could no longer tolerate his reckless behavior, leading to significant changes across the company. The newspaper barely mentioned William's current situation, an unusual oversight, considering he used to be a regular presence and often dominated headlines without fail. Derek walked over, leaned forward from behind the sofa, rested his head on Barry's shoulder, and glanced at the paper, asking, "What are you reading?" Barry said, "I'm watching how our main character will handle this crisis." Barry had only just regained his memory, and William's luck began to collapse completely. Compared to his past missteps, losing this deal wasn't the worst thing, but it still landed him in serious trouble. Derek scanned the paper and found news about the Gu family. William had already been removed from his role as CEO. The Gu family acted fast this time, didn't they? No hesitation at all. Derek couldn't help but be surprised. William had served the Gu family for years, and though he didn't have major achievements, he'd certainly earned his place. How could one mistake linked to Amelia bring him down so suddenly? William dealt with his illegitimate younger brother overseas, and his father was upset, so he took the opportunity to strike back. Snowball explained to Derek, shifting into shape on the sofa and stretching comfortably. If William still had his lucky break, actions like this would have only strengthened his hold over the Gu family. But alas, what's taken by stealth never lasts long. He made a wrong move at a moment with no favorable conditions or timing. The Gu family already had doubts about him internally, and killing a relative only gave others ammunition to attack him. His failure caused him to lose control over Barry's fortune, leading the world consciousness to lose its grip on Barry as well. An illegitimate younger brother. Derek was surprised. Is the world consciousness finally giving up? The plot is falling apart. How could it push William, who hasn't even taken charge yet, to seize power? In novels, authors usually wait until they've consolidated power before making a move, but the world consciousness doesn't care about that. It's even less logical than the author. Snowball gave a human-like shrug and said, "Who knows?" William's misfortune wasn't just losing his CEO position. It triggered a chain of events. The Gu family's business came under strategic attacks from others. Within days, they looked like a defeated rooster whose fine feathers had all fallen off, exposing bare skin as it strutted around in shame and humiliation. Once admired by everyone, William became an outcast so disgraced that his name was no longer spoken aloud. Compared to William, Barry had it all going smoothly. Both in love and career, everything that had been taken from him returned in full. The only thing that bothered Derek was that the world didn't return to normal after Barry regained his memories. It remained stuck at a single moment, as if it couldn't reach an ending. That feeling of being stuck in a single moment was terrible. It made it hard to breathe, but this situation didn't last long. It was quickly disrupted by an emergency call. Snowball double-checked the system alert before finally confirming it was the one-tap emergency alarm Derek had set up for Amelia, which only activated when her safety was in danger. "Derek, Amelia is in trouble." Snowball immediately shared the update with Derek. Amelia and William had long been pretending to get along, but this time her escape had brought trouble on William, who had brought her back and kept her locked inside the villa ever since. William was going through a tough time, so he didn't let her off the hook. Derek's earlier setup had accidentally saved her life. She managed to escape from William's villa, but that was all she'd achieved. Everything she has now depends entirely on William. Without him, She has nothing at all. Even the things she took from the Liu family have mostly been used up due to poor management and a lavish lifestyle. The only remaining property, a villa, still carries a heavy maintenance fee. William won't let this go easily. If Amelia isn't careless, she'll surely turn to Barry right now. Derek was at a party tonight, a gathering hosted by prominent figures in the film industry. He had just finished chatting with someone and slipped away when others were busy toasting. He and Samuel run this entertainment company, which has benefited greatly from Isabella's support. Under normal circumstances, Isabella would definitely be at an event like this, but Derek didn't see Isabella today. She exists only through stories, just like Barry's parents. Derek called Barry and said plainly, "Amelia and William have split up. She just escaped from William's villa. I think she'll probably come looking for you. Don't meet with her alone." Barry had to work overtime today and wasn't with Derek. He was at the company right now. Amelia was likely heading straight home, so Barry pulled up the security cameras near the villa to look for any unusual activity. On the phone, Derek went on, "In the end, it's Amelia who drags you into ruin. Even though most of the risks around you have been cleared up, you never know. What if she suddenly comes up with a plan?" Barry had heard about his own fate more than once before, but back then, it was just Derek's thoughts. Now, came straight from Derek's voice. After regaining his memories, Derek stopped holding anything back. He would now speak up about the parts involving himself. Barry said, "I'm still at work. I haven't gone home, and I've got security with me. Don't worry." More people were working late than just Barry, and the office was brightly lit. Even if Amelia seemed strange, she wouldn't do anything risky in front of so many people. Derek felt much more at ease hearing that he was in a public place. "I'm almost done here. Just wait for me. I'll come find you soon." Derek knew Barry had strong security around him, but even so, he wouldn't feel at ease until he saw for himself that everything was all right. The world's consciousness had completely broken down. The main characters were now at odds with each other. No one knew what tactics it might use to carry out Barry's storyline. Derek ended the call, returned to the party, exchanged brief farewells with the host, and left early. The parking attendant brought Derek's car over and handed him the keys. A cool night breeze brushed past as Derek caught a whiff of perfume. The initial burst of fruity notes blended with subtle green, earthy undertones. Faint but enough to send a chill through Derek, because that scent was exactly the one that had drifted out from inside his own car when he opened the door. Derek and Barry don't use this kind of scent, and the parking attendant in front of him didn't seem like someone who would wear it either. Derek quickly pulled his hand back when taking the keys, but even with his quick reaction, he was caught off guard and lost the upper hand. The parking attendant's expression turned sharp and threatening, taking advantage of Derek's momentary lapse. The man quickly pulled him into the car. There was someone else in the car. The scent had come from them. Derek slumped weakly against the seat, glancing sideways at the other person. When he recognized the face, surprise surged within him. But on his face, a cold smirk appeared. "William, I really underestimated you." That night, William wore a black suit with a red tie, an unexpected splash of color against the deep black, making the red stand out vividly. He sat in the car as if he hadn't heard Derek's sarcasm, raising a hand to signal the parking attendant to drive off. Derek couldn't move his body, but his mind was still sharp. He glanced toward the side window, taking note of what was outside. "What are you looking at? Figuring out the route?" William leaned over, his black suit making him feel overwhelming in the tight space. He blocked Derek's view, those intense eyes fixed on him like a predator. Derek felt his skin crawl. There was something unsettling about William tonight. Hard to put into words. It didn't feel good at all. He looked away, saying, "What's there to figure out? Asking you directly would be faster. Where are we going?" Derek kept up a calm conversation with William while mentally instructing Snowball to prepare a plan. "Snowball? Call for help. Something's off." "Derek, there's something in the car blocking my signal." Even if Derek didn't speak up, Snowball would still reach out to others and send his exact location. But things didn't go as planned. The car had a signal jammer. William was ready for this. He'd taken over Derek's vehicle and tampered with it. Derek subtly frowned, as if something didn't feel right. "Tell me your destination. Would that help you send a message to Barry?" William's gaze was cold, and he gave a careless smirk. Too bad for you. He's got more pressing matters right now, Derek said. What do you mean? Bad news, Derek. Amelia is in critical condition. A red warning pop-up appeared in the system, and before Snowball could finish speaking, William suddenly struck Derek. Within moments, Derek began to lose consciousness. Snowball screamed in Derek's mind, but it made no difference. At Huanyu Group, Amelia didn't go home to find Barry. She went straight to the company. She tried to use her past connection to get upstairs, but was stopped by security. They didn't care about her former status. Once she left the Liu family, she had to follow company rules like everyone else. Amelia was overwhelmed with fear and argued briefly with the security guard before suddenly collapsing to the ground. Unconscious, the security guard was shocked and immediately reported the situation up the chain. After hearing the news, Barry called Derek. His phone rang with a busy signal. A faint sense of unease crept into his mind. He instructed someone to take Amelia to the hospital and then called Derek again, but the call still showed as out of service. Barry opened the location tracking feature on his phone. An app Derek had installed for him, originally meant to help Derek keep track of his whereabouts, now being used to locate Derek instead, but the signal was blocked, leaving him unable to determine Derek's location. He was safe and sound right here, while Derek had vanished without a trace. There was no need for deep thought. Barry immediately suspected who was behind it. A wave of fear crept up his spine as anger surged through him. He gripped the phone tightly and forced himself to stay calm. Panic would do nothing at a time like this. He called the event organizers of today's business gala to ask when Derek had left, and after learning the exact time, he asked Mateo to track Derek's vehicle while also checking on William's whereabouts. Soon, some updates came back. Derek's car had been left in a quiet alleyway, with an electronic signal blocker and Derek's phone inside, since it was a blind spot for surveillance and located near the old district where many facilities were broken and unrepaired. The footage captured by cameras was very limited. Barry arrived at the scene. The car's interior temperature hadn't risen yet, indicating it had been left there for only a short time. Barry unlocked Derek's phone in hopes of finding clues, but found nothing. Barry leaned against Derek's car when the security footage from the event's entrance was brought over. However, because the parking attendant had his back turned to the camera, the video wasn't very clear. Barry noticed that Derek sensed something unusual and tried to pull his hand back. But it was too late. Barry, we verified with the hotel. The man isn't a formal staff member. He was brought in through an introduction as a part-time worker. The assistant reported the findings. The suspect had prepared carefully, using the parking opportunity to obtain Derek's car keys. He drove off with Derek's car for a while before returning it. Also, I found that William has filed a flight plan for his private jet. It's scheduled to depart overseas tonight. William's vehicles were also within the assistant's investigation scope. Though we confirmed the plane details, no matching car records have been found yet. So William's current whereabouts remain uncertain. The social environments differ drastically between domestic and overseas locations. If William actually takes Derek abroad, the consequences could be severe. Barry didn't hesitate. He gave the order, "Go to the airport." As he actually got into the car and watched the streetlights flashing past outside, Barry suddenly realized something was off. Something didn't feel right. Everything had gone too smoothly. All this information had come too easily. William wouldn't have overlooked that possibility. He could do it, and so could Barry. If he truly wanted to take Derek away, why would he leave no trace at all? Going public with such a move, leaving behind a trail of clues for Barry to follow? Would he really fly overseas? What if this whole thing was just a distraction meant to throw Barry off track? Barry felt deep uncertainty. The car fell silent, and the quiet amplified his racing heartbeat. He kept going over the situation in his mind. William would definitely have a backup plan. What could it be? The sudden ring of the phone shattered the silence in the car, and the assistant on the passenger seat quickly answered. Barry glanced over, noticing the assistant sitting sideways with a tense expression now turning serious. He hung up and turned to Barry, saying firmly, "Barry, the hospital just called. Amelia didn't survive. The doctor conducted a toxicology test and confirmed it was likely murder. Police have arrived at the hospital, and our people are handling the situation." Barry looked up, suddenly understanding. William had been waiting for him all along. With police involvement, investigations and evidence collection were unavoidable, since the incident happened in Huanyu, and as a company manager there and former guardian of Amelia, Barry wouldn't escape being questioned by the authorities. He certainly knew how Amelia had died. He could tell the police the truth. But then who would ensure Derek's safety? It was as if to confirm Barry's suspicion. Derek's phone buzzed softly, a message arriving. Barry opened the message and saw a photo. Derek was unconscious and lying in the back seat of the car. Barry had barely finished viewing the photo when an unknown call came in, and William's cold voice rang from the other end of the line. Barry's a smart man. You know perfectly well which matters more. Your loved one or a sister you have no real bond with. Just help me get away safely, and your person will be unharmed. Barry held the phone and asked, "What do you want from me?" William's side echoed with the sound of a knife handle tapping against the car seat, as if he was thinking it over deliberately before finally saying, "Tell the police that you killed Amelia." The absurd demand was delivered as if it were perfectly reasonable. Barry let out a dry laugh, mocking, "Police aren't fools. That's because you didn't put in the effort. Barry, you decide what to do, your choice." William's voice came through the phone like a cold breeze down Barry's spine. He raised his hand to signal for a stop, no longer heading toward the airport. "William, your target is me. This has nothing to do with Derek. If you hurt him, even if I stay silent, the Jiang family won't let this go quietly. Do you really think running abroad will fix everything?" Barry used Derek's phone to talk while texting on his own, sending the message straight to his assistant. "Contact Mason and have him handle Amelia's arrangements at the hospital, while cooperating with the police investigation. The Liu family has a legal team. Professional matters should be left to professionals, not decided by what William says. He's a reckless man with no integrity. Every word out of his mouth can't be trusted. Barry, how can you be so sure my target is you and not Derek? What do you think the Jiang family would feel if they found out Derek got involved because of you?" Barry's heart skipped a beat, his expression flickering. Derek being captured because of him wasn't part of any story he knew. How could William possibly know? Sweat prickled at Barry's palms as he instantly rejected William's words, his tone slightly puzzled. "What are you talking about?" William paused for 2 seconds, then burst into laughter. After he'd finished, he mocked through the phone. "Barry, turns out there's something even you don't know. Seems like fate is on my side." He didn't wait for Barry's reaction and ended the call right away. Barry listened to the dial tone echoing through the phone, his face shadowed in darkness, making it impossible to read his expression. He ran his fingers over Derek's phone, realizing that he and Derek had made a critical mistake. With the story unraveling and key figures disappearing one by one, how could William, existing in the same reality as them, remain unaffected? The future was constantly shifting because of present choices, already filled with hidden dangers. "Barry, should we still go to the airport?" The assistant in the passenger seat asked cautiously. Barry waved him off. There was no need now. He was certain William hadn't taken Derek to the airport, and his flight wouldn't be leaving tonight. For William, who still remembers everything, leaving now would mean a complete defeat to Barry. No matter which world they were in, he'd be nothing more than Barry's underling. He could never accept such an outcome. At the very least, right now, while he believed Barry hadn't yet regained his memory, he would definitely seek a new way to challenge Barry, because this was the only moment when he still had even the slightest advantage over Barry. From childhood to adulthood, William had always been overshadowed by Barry. Through school and into business, he'd heard nothing but stories about Barry's achievements, and whenever people talked about him, they'd hesitate before speaking, their eyes filled with disdain and disrespect. William despised this situation even more than he hated Barry himself. He wouldn't miss a single chance to take down Barry, even though he was at his wit's end right now. Barry couldn't help but wonder, if he were William, where would he go in a situation like this? Barry was lost in thought when suddenly a familiar mechanical voice rang out beside him. "Primary host offline. Linking to secondary host now. Secondary host searching. Secondary host connection in progress. Do not disconnect. Secondary host connected successfully." System information updated. Barry saw a white arc of light appear before his eyes, gradually taking on the shape of Snowball. Unlike its usual calm demeanor, Snowball looked rather flustered now. Its silver fur stood on end in disarray, and its whiskers were curled as if zapped by electricity. It was busy licking its fur when it looked up, their gazes meeting directly. They stared at each other for 3 seconds, both expressions unusually intense. Snowball froze in disbelief, stammering, "Second host. You can actually see me?" Barry nodded. There was no need to hide anything now. Worried about Derek, Snowball's arrival felt like a glimmer of hope. He skipped the tutorial and said straight away, "I've always been able to see and hear you." Snowball's mind overloaded. Like smoke rising from its head, the assistant in the front turned around, noticed Barry wasn't speaking to him, and quickly looked back ahead. Barry immediately changed his approach, thinking, "You've been with Derek all along. How did you end up here? How is Derek doing?" When Derek was mentioned, Snowball snapped back to attention. It didn't have time to dwell on anything else and quickly steadied itself, saying, "Derek is unconscious. I couldn't connect with him and got pushed out instead. I got a shock in the process, then ended up linked to you. Can you track Derek's location now?" "Not sure. There's a signal blocker in the car." Snowball pulled up the updated system, and sure enough, a new entry appeared in the host list. It quickly glanced at it and felt uneasy, deciding to look away rather than dwell on it, then focused entirely on finding relevant plot details. Wait, so the main character just disappeared like that? Did William regain his memories? Is the story now connected to the real world's final outcome? The fan-created world hasn't collapsed yet. The dense stream of data hit Snowball hard. It had only been offline for a moment. Just a brief break, not days or weeks. But the storyline had spiraled out of control like an untamed horse that couldn't be reined in. Barry caught the key point and asked, "What happened in the real world's final outcome?" Snowball glanced through the data and said, "William faced setbacks in both love and business, was cut off from the Goo family, and after losing everything, he's determined to drag Derek down with him." William didn't want to die, especially after realizing he could have a different life. Ambition pushed aside his despair, and desire grew stronger. He started making new plans. The car moved along a pitch-black road, with no lights on either side. Shadows of trees loomed overhead as the cold white headlights sliced through the darkness. Inch by inch, advancing like steps deeper into a nightmare, William looked down at Derek. In the darkness, senses sharpened, and memories from the past seemed to drift in like shadows. When William and Amelia were in danger overseas, he regained his memories and learned the truth about this world. The person who should have been his ally, Amelia, lacked connections from the Liu family and formal education. She acted like a clumsy figure, dragging him down into despair. Yet Derek, despite being pushed aside by society, remained steadfast in choosing Barry, as if no matter how much the world changed, he would always stand beside him. William and Barry felt like an inseparable pair. Jealousy and anger nearly overwhelmed William. If he had already broken free from his old fate, why couldn't Derek belong to him? William used Amelia to set everything in motion, and he wondered how long that world standing by his side could hold together. Derek woke up again, only to realize he was trapped. He sat up to take in the room's layout. It looked barely 20 square meters, furnished with simple pieces of furniture. The windows were old wooden frames without any railings, and the white paint on the walls had yellowed over time, probably rarely visited. A dusty cobweb hung in one corner, thick with grime. Derek could take in the entire room at a glance, seeing no place where someone could hide. The driver was dozing off on a chair by the door. William was nowhere to be seen. Derek had no idea what happened after he lost consciousness, so he instinctively reached out to Snowball. "Snowball? Where is this?" No response came. After waiting a moment, Derek suddenly realized the system that had been in his mind was gone. No more glowing dots. He paused for a few seconds, then looked up toward the window. The sun had reached its peak in the sky, yet the room remained cool. His sleeping spot wasn't exposed to direct sunlight, and there was even a faint chill in the air. This old house wouldn't have climate control, nor air conditioning or fans to cool it down. The fact that it's so refreshing in the middle of summer must mean it's located in a naturally ideal spot. Derek mentally ran through the nearby summer retreats in the city area, but most didn't offer such a cooling effect. The place he was now could only be even farther away than those resorts. Had he been brought deep into the mountains? Derek made a loud noise, waking up the sleeping driver. "I need to see William," Derek said, his face hard and expression unfriendly. The driver didn't argue but glanced at Derek briefly before walking out the door. Outside, the sun was bright. Derek looked ahead to endless stretches of greenery, revealing nothing useful. The driver didn't go far, and soon William entered. He wore a silver-gray shirt with sleeves rolled up to his elbows, showing toned forearms. As William approached, Derek noticed a bandage wrapped around his chest, indicating he had been injured. "What do you mean by this?" Derek looked at William with clear annoyance. "It's just a way to make sure we can sit down and talk calmly." William's gaze settled on Derek's face, tinged with a hint of curiosity and careful assessment. After a moment, he spoke. "Which Derek are you?" Derek frowned in confusion, his mind racing with turmoil. He held back his emotions and said, "What do you mean by that?" William adjusted the watch on his wrist, a faint smirk appearing in his otherwise cold expression. "Derek, we used to be friends. In a moment like this, wouldn't it be better to be honest with each other?" When William brought up the past, that subtle sense of unease solidified, and Derek suddenly understood why he had been taken. The rift between him and William ran deeper than most. It wasn't just a falling out. They'd gone from close friends to something irreparable. In contrast, William and Barry's disagreements were mostly about business. Competition naturally leads to tensions, with reality and fiction turned upside down after everything they'd been through. Seeing the real William again didn't stir the excitement Derek had expected. He said, "You yourself admitted that was the past. Am I still your friend now? Just say it straight. What do you want from me?" Derek dropped the pretense and asked outright. William's expression turned icy, his voice as sharp as falling ice shards. "Do we really have to talk only in terms of interests? Besides interests, what else is there to discuss with you?" Derek scoffed, his tone laced with quiet sarcasm. "William, are you forgetting things again? From the start, you're reaching out to me. It was all about gain, wasn't it?" Derek was outgoing and vibrant, like a green plant growing freely in the wind. He had a good nature and stood by his friends, earning him strong respect in social circles. Even if people couldn't be close to him, they'd avoid offending him. Whenever someone's name came up with him involved, others would usually give him some goodwill. William had seen value in his connections and used that link to his advantage. But once the two grew close, he began turning Derek's kindness into something for personal gain. Derek treated him as a friend. William used Derek as a symbol of his own standing. William clearly realized that point. His lips moved slightly, trying to argue back, but no words came out. Derek remembered the past events too. The unpleasant moments still weighed heavily on his mind. The atmosphere between the two suddenly became awkward. The iron bed was a bit too low for Derek, who found sitting uncomfortable and promptly lay back down. He leaned against the pillow, hoping to close his eyes and ignore the situation, but hunger pangs from his body made him change his mind. It had been hours since Derek last ate or drank anything, and his energy levels were dropping. In their current situation, that was far from ideal. Derek said, "I'm hungry. Don't you have anything to eat?" William stood up and left, then came back a little later with bread and water, tossing them toward Derek. Derek checked the seal on the items, making sure they were intact before opening them. William didn't leave. He stayed seated nearby. After a moment, he spoke again. "Derek, can we start over?" Derek let out a cold laugh, as if questioning what right William had to ask. He used Derek's popularity to benefit himself, then disappeared when things went wrong, leaving Derek to face the hostility and hurt alone, completely unaware. Thinking back now still made Derek feel disgusted. How could someone who made a mistake just brush it off so casually, without even apologizing or waiting for forgiveness, and act like nothing happened? After finishing the bread and drinking half a bottle of water, Derek paused to think before asking, "What did you do to Amelia?" Before losing consciousness, Snowball had said Amelia was in critical condition. Now that Snowball was gone, Derek assumed the worst for Amelia. What's the point of bringing her up? Someone so overreaching deserves whatever happens to her. She brought it on herself. William spoke with a cold tone. He felt nothing toward Amelia, and even grew irritated just mentioning her. His brow furrowed in displeasure. He looked at Derek, noticing the irritation on his face, and gave a cold laugh. What? You're actually feeling sorry for someone who stole your life? In the story, Barry had always made concessions toward Amelia, not just because the author diminished his character, but also because the world's consciousness had replaced Derek with Amelia. The affection Barry showed her, the tolerance and quiet approval, was something uniquely reserved for Derek. Derek didn't feel sorry for Amelia. It was William's indifference that made him shudder. Amelia had been created to fulfill his needs. She was meant to assist him as the story dictated, like a devoted partner. But once the situation slipped out of control, she'd be discarded without hesitation. William, no matter what kind of world it is, you only ever love yourself. If a person doesn't look out for themselves, heaven and earth will punish them. What's wrong with me loving myself? Should I really expect someone else to care about me? William didn't see anything wrong with that. He had once hoped for love. Love from his parents, family, friends, even a romantic partner. But in the end, he realized all of it was false. Even this world, the one supposedly created by the author for him, turned out to be fake. What good is a woman who can't tell right from wrong? Should he really feel grateful for her foolishness? There was an obvious choice available. Giving Derek to him, that would have satisfied both his desires and ambitions. But the author didn't do it. Instead, they went through great trouble to create a clumsy figure, allowing that person to take Derek's place in Barry's constant favor, rather than giving him an easy path. Ultimately, the author isn't fond of him, just fascinated by the arrogance of misleading others and controlling everything. William watched Derek with keen interest, not missing a single flicker on his face, hoping to see panic and inner turmoil. But Derek remained calm. So calm it almost felt like he was treating him as if he were foolish. The Liu family is immensely powerful, so Barry would have to be out of his mind to pull something like this. By now, he probably already searched the entire city several times over. Derek wasn't even in town at the time. Seeing no sign of Derek's distress, William's expression froze for a moment, then rage and jealousy flooded his chest. Do you really believe that much in him? I trust you, Derek said. I trust that you won't keep your word. William's lips twitched upward at the first part, but the smile vanished before it could settle. Crushed by Derek's next words, he hadn't really planned to let Derek go. Derek was now his only hope. If he could tame Derek and break him apart from Barry, he'd gain the support of the Jiang family. Once that happened, he'd surely rise again. Derek, I know what you're thinking, but your hope will fall flat. Barry won't find you. William was confident in the place he'd chosen. He had time to wait and keep going with Derek. Derek glanced at him without saying a word. William still didn't understand him well. How could he possibly just sit and wait? Derek was trapped inside the house, with very limited access to information. No one would speak to him except William. He used the sun's position to estimate time, doing his best to conserve energy. William wouldn't let him go without water. He'd provide some, but not food, and each time he brought water, he tried to influence Derek's thoughts. From William's words, Derek realized he wasn't just trying to recover his memories. He also knew about the world centered on him, and now felt trapped with no way out, hoping to turn things around through one last chance. He would test Derek from time to time, but Derek always acted as if nothing was wrong. William, I need to use the restroom. Derek was led by William out of the room. Sunlight poured in, making his eyes sting, and he squinted to look outside. Rolling mountains stretched endlessly into the distance. They were on a mountaintop, with endless greenery beneath them. Dense forests swaying under thick foliage. A few distant signs of human habitation could be seen here and there, but all were far apart. Derek couldn't figure out where they were. Before he had time to take a closer look, William pulled him toward the nearby bathroom. The space was less than 4 square meters, just cement on the floor with no tiles. The shower and toilet weren't separated, and a washing machine was piled inside, making the area feel even more cramped and tight. Derek and William stepped into the room together. The space felt tighter than before. After a pause, Derek said, "William, are you going to watch me use the toilet?" William replied, "Is it inconvenient? Or do you need some help?" William moved closer. Derek raised his hand and pressed against William's chest. The bathroom was too cramped to move around, and Derek wasn't about to start a fight here. "There's no way out through the window, just the door. So are you really worried I'd run off?" Derek said plainly, "With a grown man standing right beside me, I honestly can't do anything." Derek was already close to snapping, but William sensed the tense mood and knew he couldn't push too hard. William stepped out of the bathroom and closed the door behind him. Derek quickly scanned the room again. No suitable weapon or defense tools were within reach. Derek considered the situation in his mind. He didn't have much of a chance if he had to face William and the guard at the same time. But since he hadn't seen the guard when he came out, that was an opening. In a one-on-one fight, he wasn't behind William. Derek made up his mind and lingered in the bathroom for a while before stepping out. William was waiting outside, blocking the only passage. He lit a cigarette, then extinguished it when he saw Derek come out. Moving closer, Derek deliberately covered his nose and waved his hand lightly, using the motion to scan the surroundings. The yard outside the house was uneven, with a gravel path winding beside it, leading into the bushes. The guard was definitely gone. Derek remembered hearing a car start up earlier. He must have left. That was good news. Derek suddenly spoke up. "William, do you like me?" The heartfelt question caused William to pause noticeably, his thoughts briefly slipping away. The word "like" made him pause for a moment, just long enough for Derek to act. Derek's fist shot upward, striking William's jaw with a heavy thud that sent shivers down the spine. William staggered back 2 steps before regaining his balance. When Derek delivered another sweeping kick, the sharp force of the move struck William like lightning, knocking him off balance and sending him crashing to the ground. Derek pressed forward with 2 quick steps, but William had already recovered. He rolled sideways, barely escaping Derek's next attack in a clumsy dodge. He scrambled to his feet, then reached up to realign his jaw and wiped blood from the corner of his mouth. "Derek, I really underestimated you." William was clearly upset. Derek had been cooperative after waking up, which made him let his guard down. He never expected Derek to pull a move like this right now. Derek responded only with attacks, launching rapid side kicks that forced William out of the passage and all the way into the open courtyard. The courtyard was paved with gray stone tiles, lush with greenery in summer. Likely long abandoned, weeds had sprouted through the cracks, covering the ground. Derek was skilled in close combat and had the upper hand, launching swift and forceful strikes that pushed William into constant defense. Derek didn't intend to fight a long battle. He was worried the guards might come back unexpectedly, and facing 2 opponents would put him at a serious disadvantage. After forcing William back completely, he leaped into the nearby gravel path. The area was surrounded by rolling hills with rugged trails, though there were still signs of life. Derek planned to reach out to the outside world first and figure out where he was. Unfamiliar with the terrain, Derek ran along the stone path for a while. He wasn't sure if it was just his imagination, but he thought he heard the hum of an approaching car, his heart skipping a beat. Spotting a narrow trail by the side, he turned without hesitation and stepped into it. Derek was tense and focused only on the pursuer behind him, not paying attention to where he was going, when he suddenly collided head-on with someone. Moving at high speed with strong momentum, he couldn't stop in time, and both he and the person he hit tumbled down the path due to the force of impact. Fortunately, one side wasn't a sheer cliff but a gently sloping soft patch of ground covered in thick pine trees. The forest floor was layered with pine needles, some long decayed, others freshly fallen, whose sharp tips pricked the skin and caused stinging pain. Derek's shoulder slammed into a leftover tree stump from logging, sending a dull ache spreading through his body, leaving his arm temporarily numb and unable to move. The person who fell with him seemed used to such impacts, managing to protect herself well, though the backpack on her back slowed her down, causing her to roll twice before coming to a stop in front of Derek after hitting a tree. Derek hadn't expected anyone to be out here in the remote countryside, let alone accidentally cause someone else harm. Struggling to rise, He reached out to check on her condition. As soon as he shifted his foot, she tossed aside her backpack and suddenly sat up straight. From behind, she looked like a young girl with a small bun hairstyle, wearing a sun-protective jacket and long pants, and sturdy hiking shoes on her feet. The force of the fall had torn a large rip in her jacket, and her bun was half undone. She adjusted her hair, then turned to look for another person's figure. When her eyes met Derek's, she first looked angry, then surprised, and finally widened her eyes in disbelief, staring at him as if seeing something impossible. "Brother Derek, what are you doing here?" Derek was stunned when she said his name. Was there really someone who knew him in this remote mountain area? Derek studied her face closely. Though smeared with damp pine needles and dirt, it didn't hide her features. Thin eyelids, upward slanting outer corners, giving her eyes a distinctive, fox-like shape, a truly unique pair of eyes. Derek froze, surprised and delighted. "You're John. What are you doing here?" John quickly scrambled to her feet, not even pausing for her backpack, then hurried over to help Derek up, brushing the pine needles off his clothes. She explained, "This is my hometown, but what about you, brother? You don't look well, what happened?" Upon hearing this was John's hometown, Derek froze in disbelief and couldn't help but snap. What a crazy idea! Absolutely insane. John's hometown was over 1,000 kilometers away from the city where Derek was located, taking at least 10 hours even on highways, not to mention the national and rural roads. William brought him to such a distant place. No wonder he was so confident Barry wouldn't find him. Who in their right mind would ever think of that? How long had he been unconscious? Anyway, after letting off some steam, Derek calmed down slightly. Then he heard the sound of an approaching car again and instantly tensed up. John noticed his reaction and, putting together what was happening on the mountain, began to suspect what might have occurred. For days now, outsiders have been coming here and using the mountain lodge. The mountain hut was built by villagers for hunters or forest keepers to rest and spend the night. Because the outsiders were generous with their money, the village head said nothing and readily lent them the cabin. It now seems these people aren't trustworthy. "I need to get out of here," Derek said. "Someone's taken me hostage." John thought it was as she expected, and gently reassured Derek. "Brother, don't worry. Once we're on my turf, I'll take care of you." John picked up the fallen basket, didn't stop to gather the scattered fruits, and pulled Derek deeper into the woods. With her as their guide, Derek wouldn't have to worry about getting lost and could stay off the main road, avoiding being spotted by William's vehicle. The path down the mountain was still long, and if they were caught, even with John knowing the area, there was no guarantee that William would stay calm. Getting to a crowded place was their best chance. Derek asked John for her phone and dialed Barry's number. On the other end, Barry's voice sounded unsure. "It's me, brother. I'm in Shishue village. Lucky for me, I ran into John, so I wanted to check in and let you know I'm safe." Derek's voice came through the receiver clearly and calmly, showing no signs of weakness. Though he'd only eaten a little bread today and mostly relied on water to stay alive, he managed to keep going. After all that running, his limbs felt weak and shaky. There was a 2-second silence on the other end. Then Barry's voice trembled. "Hold on. I'm coming." To conserve his strength, Derek didn't say much to Barry, his injured arm still unable to lift. John walked ahead and kept glancing back to check on him, making sure Derek was keeping up. Outside, the sun was setting, but the fading light couldn't pierce through the thick forest. The trail in the woods gradually vanished, and the two men were now moving through the trees. Looking around, all he saw were tall trees and layers of decaying leaves spread across the ground. Occasionally, a breeze swept through the woods, carrying a damp scent and an eerie chill. Derek rubbed his arms, a chill creeping up from his feet, and for a moment his mind felt distant and unfocused. Countless questions swirled in Derek's mind. His vision began to blur, and John's figure grew indistinct. John turned back and realized Derek hadn't followed. He had collapsed on the ground. John was startled. She couldn't recall Derek having any serious illness. This reaction had to be linked to those strangers. John lifted him onto his back and headed downhill. William met up with his bodyguard. One went downward while the other drove upward. Neither spotted any sign of Derek along the way. William's expression grew dark as he scanned the rolling mountains, his voice cold. "Is it time to administer the antidote?" The bodyguard replied, "Yes." William only wanted to use Derek, not to harm him. If Derek were to die, the consequences would be far more serious than anyone could handle. With so many dense mountains surrounding them, it would take days just for the two of them to search every corner thoroughly. Impossible in a single night. "Let's go to the village and ask for help from the locals. Say my younger brother is missing." William didn't dare to waste time. He and his bodyguard quickly got into the car and drove down the mountain. "We need to find him as soon as possible before it gets dark." The mountain path was tough, but John was used to it and didn't find it hard. The only challenge was that Derek was a heavy adult man, so she had to stop several times for rest along the way. She kept an eye on Derek's condition. After the initial shaking subsided, his heartbeat and vital signs stabilized, and he remained unconscious. John had some basic first aid knowledge and confirmed Derek was stable for now, so she quickened her pace down the mountain. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the rural path in hues of sunset. At this time of day, there were usually plenty of villagers walking along the path to relax and chat about daily life. Today was unusual. There was an unexpected stillness on the road. John was about to take Derek to the village clinic when she passed by the community office and noticed people gathered there. The younger adults were inside, while women and children stood outside, some holding flashlights. John heard the village chief's voice, but the crowd noise was too loud for her to make out what he was saying. Perhaps there was something going on in the village, but John didn't give it much thought. Right now, Derek's safety was the top priority. John turned to leave, carrying the person on his back. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed a car parked nearby, an out-of-town license plate that had been seen around the village quite often lately. "Have they already found us?" John thought to himself. Someone in the crowd spotted her and called out, "Xiao Jun, where have you been?" "The village chief just sent people to look for you, Sophia." "I went into the mountains. I wasn't at home," John said, recognizing a familiar face. Sophia was the village's kindergarten teacher and had always been kind to John. Uninterested in the crowd's commotion, she walked over by stepping across the flower bed in front of the village office. She adjusted her glasses on her face and only then noticed John carrying someone. She was startled and stepped forward even more earnestly, asking, "What happened? Who is this person?" John didn't answer Sophia. Instead, he glanced toward the crowd and asked carefully, "What's going on here?" Sophia explained, "A few days ago, some outsiders arrived. The taller one said his younger brother went missing in the mountains and is offering money to anyone in the village who helps look for him." Sophia glanced at the unfamiliar face on John's back, and given that John had just come from the mountain, it felt like an unlikely coincidence. John realized things matched what he'd suspected. After a brief hesitation between confronting them directly or taking a more cautious approach, she said, "Is the doctor around too? Could you please get him here? Someone on my back needs medical attention." Sophia saw how urgent she was, so she turned around to call for help. The doctor arrived shortly after. John handed the person over to the doctor and Sophia, then grabbed a nearby stick that was within reach before rushing straight into the crowd of onlookers. "Village chief, don't let them fool you. They're human traffickers." John shouted with such force that her voice rang out like thunder in still air. The crowd quickly parted, and the village chief, who had been speaking mid-sentence, turned to look at John. The 18-year-old girl stepped forward into the crowd, standing tall and confident. Though young, she had grown up with a sense of responsibility, and this year she'd been admitted to a top university. Among the people here, she was already seen as a future national asset. Many people were willing to listen to what she said. The sky had grown dark, and William's patience had already run out when the village chief gathered the people. Now, hearing John's voice, his expression turned completely grim, as dark as a lump of ink. Seeing his displeasure, the village chief quickly stepped in. "This is the young lady I mentioned earlier, Xiao Jun. Don't let her gender fool you. She often goes into the mountains to gather wild goods and knows the forest well. Plus, she's skilled in 2 techniques. She'll definitely be of help." John stepped forward and gently pulled the village chief away from William and the other man, then said, "There's no need to search. This person isn't in the woods. These two may look like ordinary folks, but they're actually criminals. The road we built, the street lights installed, the school repairs, even the students' uniforms, they were all funded by the Zhang family. Today you ran into us. That's your bad luck. John's last words were meant for William alone. She didn't know why this man had brought Derek here, but she knew one thing: this was her territory. As long as she had a voice, they wouldn't get away so easily. Shishui village has thrived in recent years thanks to the support from the Zhang family and Lu family. That road built out of the village and connected to the national highway has brought livelihoods to countless people. And those cement paths winding through the forest have saved so much trouble when transporting timber. The crowd around them stirred with unease. People had come with kind intentions, only to nearly become accomplices in a dangerous scheme. Turns out they're human traffickers? How bold can you get? Do they really think we country folk are easy to fool? If it weren't for Xiao Jun's warning, we'd have walked right into their trap. This is just terrible. Call the police. We must report them and get them arrested. People had gathered to help, many carrying tools they'd brought for searching and clearing paths. But now those same tools were being used as weapons in a standoff with William. William and his companion were alone, the bodyguard sensing danger, tensing up and shielding William. William stared straight at John. Recalling this was Amelia's hometown, simple villagers, narrow-minded and greedy, willing to do anything for money. He had sent people to gather information before planning to bring Derek here, believing everything was under his control, until John suddenly appeared. This girl stood out so noticeably in the village, yet why was there not a single word about her in the intelligence he had collected? Sweetheart, I can see you're still young and inexperienced. Don't let yourself be misled. My brother has some issues. I brought him here to help him relax and get better. William's eyes sharpened with intensity as he pointed briefly toward his temple, suggesting that Derek was unwell, just someone supported by the Zhang family. Grew up in a remote mountain area. Could he really have known Derek? The priority now was getting her to hand over Derek. John sensed the hidden threat in his words and gave a cold smirk. The Zhang family's elder brother is an only child. So are you his sibling? I know the Zhang family has a longtime rival, and coincidentally, they share your surname. Do I even need to spell out what kind of person you are? John wasn't unaware of the long-standing conflict between the Zhang and Lu families. Those two brothers had shown genuine concern for her studies and well-being, and they'd even met in person. On one side was a stranger with no known background, and on the other was John, someone the villagers had watched grow up. They didn't need to think twice about who to trust. What's the point of talking? Just grab him already. The villagers weren't interested in idle talk. The village chief had already called the police, facing a crowd that was growing increasingly aggressive. The bodyguard still stood protectively beside William. In truth, he could have easily blocked the villagers if he'd wanted to. There were many villagers, but few had any training. Their car was just nearby. William had a real chance to drive away, but William didn't seem to have that plan at all. He stared intently at John, his figure lost in the deep darkness of night, his eyes sharp with intensity and cold determination. The bodyguard couldn't figure out what William was thinking. John held the stick steady, meeting his gaze without a hint of fear. Behind her was the noisy crowd, but she stood still now, as straight and unyielding as a tall pine tree, showing strength and resolve. Both supported by the same program and both 18, William seemed to sense something. He lowered his head and let out a faint smile, half self-mocking, half tinged with sorrow. John stayed alert, tense-faced, wary of any trickery. Little June, the doctor needs you. Your friend isn't doing well. Sophia hurried over from outside the village office, her voice drawing everyone's attention. Without thinking, John started to run toward her, but stopped mid-step, turned back into the crowd, and swung his long stick forward, pointing it straight at William. Did you cause this behind the scenes? Derek had always been in good health with no underlying conditions, and seeing him fall ill today made John uneasy. William didn't respond. The bodyguard was as silent as a fish, and John found himself stuck. Sophia urged her, "Why don't you go take a look first?" John thought for a moment, stepped out of the crowd, and called Barry to explain the situation in detail, sharing his suspicions as well. Rural medical resources were limited. Doctors there mostly dealt with common issues like colds and fevers, and they couldn't quickly assess Derek's condition. Barry brought a doctor along, so John rushed straight to the clinic and handed over the phone, allowing the two of them to speak directly. The clinic's bed was basic, and Derek lay quietly on it, his face pale. John stayed by his side and periodically checked in with William and the others in the village group chat. Villagers armed with tools surrounded them tightly, while children were taken inside by adults and kept from coming out. The town's police station was far away, and it took about an hour for the sirens to arrive. Soon after they got there, a new convoy entered the village. Derek didn't know how long he'd been walking. He felt trapped in a loop, unable to find his way out. It was completely dark around him, silent as death. Tired, he stopped and sat down on the ground. After some time, he thought he heard someone calling his name. He turned toward the sound and saw a little boy in a shirt and overalls standing beside him, pouting with his lips, cheeks puffed out, kicking his feet with annoyance. "Why aren't you waking up yet?" Derek was startled. His body suddenly dropped downward, the sudden sense of weightlessness jolting him awake. Light flooded into his eyes, and Derek instinctively raised his hand to shield them, only to realize his hand was being held by someone else. The sudden movement woke the person holding his hand. "How do you feel? Is there anywhere that hurts?" A concerned voice came from nearby, and as Derek turned his head, he saw Barry's face. It had only been 2 days since they'd last seen each other, yet Barry looked worn out. Dark circles under his eyes, hair hanging loose, a faint shadow along his jawline. Compared to his usual sharp and polished appearance, he now carried an air of quiet exhaustion. Derek gripped his hand, as if holding on to something precious he just found. "You came so fast." "Rode a plane." William brought Derek through the hassle of security checks and long stretches on the highway, but Barry didn't have that trouble. Before receiving Derek's call, Snowball had already guessed his location roughly, so they took the nearest flight and landed quickly. The assistant handled everything from start to finish, arranged transportation and ensured smooth travel all the way. Derek looked around at the unfamiliar, rather plain-looking hospital room. Outside the window, the solar-powered streetlight dimmed as its energy ran low, casting light only over a small area. The faint glow outside contrasted sharply with the bright indoor lighting, making the outside seem pitch black and impossible to see through. It was so quiet around them that Derek felt for a moment as though they were the only two people in the whole world. Derek asked uncertainly, "Are we still in Zishuiching village?" "Yeah, this is the village clinic." The doctor went home, and I persuaded John to go back too. The doctor only comes to the clinic during daytime hours. Otherwise, he's at his own house. If someone can't find him here, they know where to look. Just a short walk around the corner. "Where's William?" Derek asked. He had no memory of what happened after entering the forest and wasn't sure what had occurred. He tried moving his injured shoulder, which was already less painful. Someone had given him a basic treatment. John exposed his true identity. The villagers called the police, and he was taken away. Would he really surrender without a fight? Derek was surprised. William actually gave himself up? Given his usual behavior, not fighting back was truly unusual. Barry had spoken with the officers and learned about William's arrest. He didn't resist at all, and seemed surprisingly calm. He's committed serious crimes. Even if he escaped today, he'd be wanted nationwide. Barry explained that the lawyer had already taken care of Amelia's situation. Her death uncovered illegal activities linked to the Gu family, causing major turmoil within the group. Derek vaguely recalled having a strange sense of confusion right before he lost consciousness in the forest. A chill ran through him as he asked, "How did I end up here?" "John carried you down from the mountain, and the doctor has given you basic initial care. We'll look into any further concerns once we get back." Barry tried to calm Derek down. Hearing that John had carried him down the mountain, Derek felt a slight warmth in his face. He couldn't fathom how John managed it under such conditions. Was it really just by walking? This whole situation has nothing to do with her. She shouldn't have been caught up in it at all. Their reunion was completely unexpected, and even now, Derek still found it hard to believe. Why isn't she at school? Isn't the term supposed to have started? Derek asked with concern. Could the world's awareness be affecting her? Barry stood up, poured a glass of water for Derek, and handed it over to soothe his throat. I checked. She finished her military training already, the school's on high heat break, so she came back to visit for 2 days. The end of summer is still scorching hot. It's not unusual for schools to delay opening or close early for student safety. Derek was lucky. Without meeting John, he wouldn't have gotten out so easily. Relieved to know John's studies hadn't been affected, Derek let out a quiet breath. After all, John had finally made it out of the mountains, with a bright and promising future ahead. There was no way he'd let some fan-driven drama ruin that. Derek held his paper cup, sipping water as cicadas hummed outside. The quiet peace of the countryside washed away the chaos and worries, bringing a sense of calm. He finished drinking, looked up at Barry, and gently brushed his hand against Barry's jaw. Have you been staying awake all this time? Staying up late always leaves a person worn out. Beards grow in fast too. Derek had guarded against every possible danger, but never expected William's target to be him. This kidnapping spanned thousands of miles. Barry must have been frantic searching through the city. Barry leaned into his touch, not feeling tired at all. With Snowball's help, they'd already ruled out many wrong leads. Compared to those 2 years, these past couple of days aren't anything at all. When Derek was taken, a remark William made struck Barry deeply. Derek had gotten into danger because of him. Back then, he'd managed to avoid danger by coming home early. Now it was Derek who had poured all his attention into protecting him, which left himself exposed to risk. They grew up together, and people always said that as the older brother, he should be the one shielding Derek, but in reality, Derek had protected him more times than he'd realized. Because Derek was in danger, Barry couldn't stay calm or relax. How could he possibly fall asleep? Derek shifted toward the inner side of the bed and patted the empty space beside him. Come on, lie down with me. I'll keep you company. The ward lights went out at the clinic, bringing calm after a stormy night. Derek needed more detailed medical checks, so Barry didn't dare keep him in the village. He planned to take Derek back first and leave the assistant and 2 bodyguards behind to handle things in the village. John still had a few days left of her break, so Barry asked her to pack up and come along for a couple of days at their place before heading back to school. After getting into college, John hadn't yet told either set of parents the good news. After a brief hesitation, she packed her things and followed along. Before leaving, she handed over the house keys to the assistant, giving them a place to stay. The return flight was in the afternoon, and Barry received a call from the police station saying that William wanted to meet John. William's case couldn't be handled at the town level and needed to be transferred higher up, but the paperwork hadn't come through yet, so he was being held here for now. Given the current situation, it was still possible to allow an outside visitor. Barry noticed he had some free time and asked John if she'd like to meet William, saying it was possible if she wanted to. John, sitting in the front passenger seat, looked completely puzzled. Why would he want to see me? Did I hurt his pride last night? Is he planning revenge? Derek and Barry exchanged a glance. Derek whispered, "It's probably because of Amelia. He knows the truth about the world, so he might have figured out that Amelia stole my life. Maybe he could also guess she took John's background too." Barry said, "If you don't want to go, it's fine, no pressure." John thought for a moment and said, "I'll go. It'd be useful to learn about criminal minds. I might even use it as an example in my studies someday." Derek couldn't help but smile. John wasn't afraid of retaliation. Instead, she was curious about understanding the mind of someone who committed crimes. Barry told the driver to turn around and head to the police station, with John sitting up front to guide him. When they arrived at the station, John explained the situation and then went in alone to meet William, while Derek and Barry waited in the lobby. The police station wasn't air-conditioned. Only a fan was whirring loudly in the room. Derek recalled how, on both occasions when he and Barry went to the police station over Amelia, they had completely different feelings. After all, she was John's sister. Amelia was always taking without giving back, leaving Barry to clean up after her. John, on the other hand, never caused any trouble. She didn't rely on anyone at all. When I first ended up in Shishue village with William, I just thought he was unstable, but now that I look back, it's not hard to figure out what his intention really was. Derek and Barry sat side by side. He turned toward Barry and said, This place is far enough off the beaten path, isolated enough. Other than its connection to Amelia, it has nothing to do with him. We automatically rule out places he might know well, but we overlook the ones that mean something special to him. But he didn't realize. There's a real Shin family girl here. Barry had gotten some rest and shaved, looking much more alert now. He clasped Derek's hand, and his thoughts perfectly matched Derek's. They had been deeply caught in a fictional story created by fans, and after stepping back, they no longer associated with Amelia now that she was gone. William's plan was well thought out, except fate wasn't on his side. The real Shin family girl appeared at the story's climax, shattering his dream completely. You're John. Your grandfather was a veteran, and you've been supported by the Jiang and Liu families all these years. You passed your college entrance exam this year and got into a top university. William looked at John sitting before him, repeating what he'd heard from others. After putting the pieces together, it wasn't hard to see where the details overlapped with Amelia's story. He figured out where Amelia's character came from, half from Derek, half from John. Derek's part came from Barry's affection and indulgence. What about John? What if the person he had met wasn't Amelia, but instead a confident and spirited John? How would the story have turned out then? John frowned, his expression filled with disappointment. Is that all you wanted to tell me? She had expected William to make threats or act out wildly, but instead he just went over her past. Hearing her tone and seeing the clear disdain on her face, William felt his heart sink. He realized once again that he was nothing more than a fool in front of everyone. Look at it, whether Derek or John, both are level-headed and clear-minded. Amelia came from them, yet she only took the smallest bits of their traits. So that was how much care the author truly felt for him. Just like this, there was already the best option in reality, yet she chose to break it apart, rebuild it from scratch, even if the result was filled with cracks. Instead of accepting the original version he offered, William burst into laughter, his expression twisted and wild. John was startled and said to the nearby officer, "He's not himself. I'm leaving now." The officer nodded, and John quickly stepped out of the room. As soon as he saw Derek and Barry, he couldn't help but vent his frustration to them. Narcissistic, unstable. John used every harsh word he could think of before finally calming down after getting into the car. She hadn't lived through that fictional world, so she didn't understand why William would ask her such a thing. Derek and Barry, however, could guess what was going on. For William, the fictional world had been filled with love. But once that illusion was torn away, he realized he had nothing left. The car raced home, and with William's downfall, illusion and reality were completely separated. Sunlight streamed into the vehicle, casting a golden glow around John in the passenger seat. In the back seat, Derek leaned against Barry, their fingers interlaced. Outside, the mountain village scenery slipped away. Mountains piled up behind them as the false world was gradually peeled off layer by layer. No girl named Amelia ever boarded the Liu family's car to leave the mountains that had held her captive. Only a young woman named John packed her things and set out toward her dreams. Behind her was the brother she deeply respected, a pair who shared a deep bond. They broke free from the chains of the world, brought this absurd chapter to an end, returned to their own lives, and began anew. The mountains stood silently behind, watching the car grow smaller as it vanished into the distance down the winding road.